Hello everyone, my name is John, I'm the Geeky Fanboy, and today we're doing something a bit different from what I'm usually talking about on this channel. Namely, let's talk books. For someone who does enjoy reading and reads not a lot, but enough, I'd say. I don't really talk about books that often on this channel, which is a shame, actually. I think the last time I explicitly spoke about books was like 2 or 3 years ago when I spoke about Ready Player One, because I didn't like that book. And now I'm back to talk about another book that, surprise, surprise, I didn't enjoy very much. Namely, today we are talking about the sensational fantasy novel Fourth Wing. Now, Fourth Wing, you could not escape this book. If you're on the internet, if you're in any way following people who read books, you are coming across Fourth Wing a lot at the moment. So what is Fourth Wing? Fourth Wing is a fantasy, maybe high fantasy book, young adult / new adult. You could debate the categories here, we're probably gonna come back to that. It was written by Rebecca Yarros. So this was Yarros's first fantasy novel. I think before that she was only known for writing romance books. I haven't read any of her previous books. And this book now is basically sort of like her breakout book. Like, this is really the one that's getting all the attention right now. So, to maybe put this in perspective, how much this book has been hyped. On Goodreads, if I take a look at my notes, on Goodreads, the book currently has 50,252 reviews with 260,136 ratings. Which is like quite a jump if you look at some of her other books. Like, her most popular romance book only has I think 10,000, not even close to 100,000 ratings, I think. And the average rating for Fourth Wing as of the time of recording this is 4.67 stars. That's almost like a perfect score. And I checked my Goodreads. I haven't read any other book that has this high of a rating. This is higher rated than the most popular or best ranked Harry Potter book. This is higher ranked than Lord of the Rings, some really fantasy staples. So yeah, this is gaining quite a lot of traction. So initially I hadn't heard of this at all, but I follow people on Instagram and on YouTube who talk about books, and suddenly everyone was talking about Fourth Wing. Everyone was talking about it, and at some point I was like, okay, tell me what is this about? So this book, to put it very generally what this book is about before we jump into it, is a fantasy novel about a young woman called Violet. She's about 20 years old, who, after training her whole life to be a scribe, suddenly has to learn how to be a dragon rider. Something that she will learn at a war college, because her country is at war. But this college is very, very deadly, a lot of people die there, and now she's supposed to learn how to become a dragon rider, which is hard because she is very frail because of a chronic illness that she has. So she goes on to train how to become a rider while not trying to die, not trying to get killed, and at the same time, of course, as is often the case with these popular fantasy novels, there's also a romance going on with one of the other students, who's sort of like a mysterious bad boy kind of person, which is sort of supposed to be like a villains to lovers or enemies to lovers kind of romance, though that is debatable. So that's sort of like the general plot. And when I heard about this, I was like, okay, it's probably not going to be that interesting to me, because while I do love fantasy, I love reading fantasy. It's one of my favorite genres to read, watch. I also write fantasy stories. I was like, okay, I'm not a big fan of romantasy. I'm probably not gonna be really into the fantasy. part of this book, but I was like, okay, so many people I follow online love this. Like, none of the people I follow have given this lower than a 4 out of 10 on 4 out of 5 on Goodreads. I was like, okay, so I'm maybe not gonna enjoy the romance, but I mean, if everyone loves it so much, the rest has to be brilliant. Like the writing style, the fantasy, the world building of dragons has to be like absolutely amazing. So that's why I decided to read Fourth Wing, because I was like, okay, I'm willing to give this a chance. I'm probably not gonna like the romance, but I'm prepared to like get swept up in like a fun fantasy dragon setting. And guess what? Then I was very quickly very disappointed by the book itself. So today I want to do a review slash analysis of Fourth Wing, because as I've said, I'm someone who loves fantasy. It's one of my favorite genres. I'm an author myself, though not a published one, but I have written novels. One of them, like the first book I wrote, was a fantasy novel. So I do have, I've invested interest in this. And as far as like professional experiences go, I'm not a professional, but I have worked previously as an editor at a publishing firm, especially as an editor for fantasy novels. That was a thing I did, not for very long, just for a couple of months. But let's say I have like some limited experience with seeing what makes a fantasy novel, and it was my job to edit fantasy novels, to like judge new manuscripts that came in and say, okay, yeah, this is actually interesting, or no, this is not really that good, we can't publish that. That was my job. So I'm sort of approaching this book with this lens as someone who like is reading this, who's like sort of familiar with the fantasy genre. And if you approach it with this lens as someone who really enjoys fantasy, who writes fantasy, who has experience in editing, it becomes really interesting to get into this novel. And before we jump into this, of course, I don't hate you if you love this book. I'm not going to blame you. I'm merely probably going to question you why you like this novel so much, because I'm gonna make like a bunch of points why I think, personally, that Fourth Wing is a bad fantasy novel. This was the author's first fantasy novel. You can tell. I'm gonna name like a couple of mistakes that are like very basic fantasy writing mistakes. And if you love this book, great. I'm so happy for you. I'm just here to tell you there is even better fantasy out there. If you love this, I'm telling you, you have so much more fantasy to discover that is even more interesting and better written. So yeah, take this video as a critique, as a book review, as an analysis, as an attempt to like, I don't know, edit this novel and make some sense of it. But yeah, this is what we're doing. So let's jump into the first chapter of Fourth Wing. Okay, so let's jump into this. In case you're wondering where I'm looking down, that's sort of where I keep my notes. So we're jumping into chapter 1, and straight away we are hit with it's almost like in medias res. We're starting with a Violet who is getting ready to leave home to join the War College. And pretty early on, we notice multiple things. First off, we're told right away that Violet is probably not going to be our, like, physically strong protagonist, because she says that she's been training for 6 months and she can barely, like, even carry her backpack up the stairs, basically. So you're automatically to believe, like, okay, did those 6 months of training do anything? What did you do? Or is there something else going on? And the other thing that you're going to notice straight away is the writing style. As you will quickly notice when you're reading this book, it's written in a, to put it friendly, in a very fantasy, untypical kind of language. Meaning it's written basically as if we're reading a YA novel in the year 2023 and everyone's just talking like they are a teenager in the year 2023. this already started with people swearing a lot. Like the F-bomb and shit is, all of those are being dropped, like first chapter, first 2 pages. It's all already there from the beginning, which feels very awkward. I'm not saying that you can't swear in a fantasy novel. Like stories like Game of Thrones have done it, but it feels rather strange if you have characters like swearing in the way that, you know, people in 2023 do, you know, like, what the hell did you just do? Or what the fuck? Or shut up. What is this shit? You know, that kind of language, right? Like, okay, are we like in a medieval adjacent fantasy world, or why is everyone why is everyone talking like this? So we're entering this kind of language, like the very first chapter, where Violet is joining her mum and her sister, who are talking about Violet joining the War College. And Violet is wholly unprepared for this. Like I said, she has trained to be a scribe, which is sort of like an academic historian kind of in this world. But her mother has decided, no, she should become a dragon rider. And Violet's sister, Mira, is vehemently against that. And I'm going to read like a little excerpt here. Sending Violet into the Rider's Quadrant is a tantamount to a death sentence. Guess Mira isn't done arguing. Mira's never done arguing with Mum, and the frustrating thing about it is that Mum has always respected her for it. Double standard for the win. She's not strong enough, Mom. She's already broken her arm this year. She sprains some joint every other week, and she's not tall enough to mount any dragon big enough to keep her alive in a battle. Seriously, Mira? What the hell? My fingernails bite into my palm as I curl my hands into fists. So that's a little taste of what the writing is like in this. This is also again where it's reiterated that Violet is too small, too frail, because, as is going to be revealed in the same title, because of a chronic illness that she has. I also think it's kind of interesting that Mira here is saying, you know, she's not strong enough, she's too small. So basically what I'm thinking is, if you were small in this world, you're fucked, because you were just too small to ride a dragon. What you gonna do? I guess you're fucked. If you're kind of small, like me for example, like 5'7", I guess you're screwed, because you're too small to ride a dragon. So, what makes this so serious is that becoming a dragon rider is a very serious business. Because it's conscription day. Conscription day means, this is when the people are conscripted to join the military. And on this day, on conscription day, it's mentioned that around 40 to 50 people die. So, I'm not going to go into the mechanics of this war school yet. We're going to come back to that in a few minutes. But there was already some confusion here, because it is mentioned here that people are being conscripted because there's a war going on. Later it's also mentioned, you know, people are sending their best and brightest. Here the mother is just saying, okay, I have signed you up now for Dragon Rider School, even though you were trained to be something else. It's not really made clear, like, is everyone just like forced to join the military? Can you avoid joining the military if some people are just sending their best and brightest? Like, what are the clear rules here? It wasn't really clear to me. So, the family keeps talking. We get some details about the family. The father died. He was also a scribe, which is why Violet also wanted to be one. There was a third sibling. There was Brandon, a brother who died in battle, but his body was never found. Wink, 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 wink. So, yeah, this is kind of a big deal. Of course, Violet is worried, but she's trying to cope. You know, she's like, oh, what I lack in strength, I make up for in speed, because that's how small people work, I guess. You're automatically fast. Of course. So, the chapter goes on. Violet's mother is very clear on her stance. She's like, no, you're going to join the Dragon Riders because I have decided this. Why she has decided that her daughter is now suddenly after months and months of scribe training, going to join the Dragon Riders is never really explored. She just says something along the lines of, everyone in the family has been a Dragon Rider, so I'm sending you to the Riders Quadrant. Only, like, very suddenly, even though you had months of scribe training before, I'm now suddenly deciding this. And you're like, okay, seems like a very reactionary kind of decision. Maybe there's like a bigger idea behind that. We don't know. Until the end of the book, we will never find out why her mother sent Violet to the Riders Quadrant. Violet will also not see her mother again throughout the entire book, only like once, maybe, I think. But otherwise, you can forget about that whole plot already, why the mother sent Violet to the Dragon Rider School. We're not going to come back to that. So, Violet packs all of her things, and Mira joins her on her way. So, on the way there, Violet is being given some advice by Mira, who's already a established Dragon Rider. So she says like stuff, be careful because, and this is important, anyone can kill you at any time except when you're asleep. And also some other like rules. There's no such thing as cheating. You do whatever you need to do. You're clever. You trick your way through school. Oh, and also have as much sex as possible. That's literally a thing she says. So, again, I'm not there yet, but just keep in mind this is a military school with a country that's at war and in desperate need for soldiers. And at this war college, they can kill each other. Just keep that in mind. I'm going to come back to this. So, Mira brings Violet to the parapet, which is like a giant ash bridge that the people who want to join the Riders Quadrant need to cross in order to join the school. This bridge, of course, is very, very deadly. So you either cross it and join the war college or you die. Again, keep that in mind that this is a country at war for several centuries, apparently, who's in desperate need for soldiers, so much so that they are conscripting people. And if you want to join the college, you have to survive an ordeal first or you die. Just keep that in mind. So they're on the way to Parapet. The one last thing Mira very randomly remembers is like, oh yeah, and by the way, keep away from a man called Zayden Ryerson, or Rierson. I never know how to pronounce this boy's last name. Just like really randomly at the last minute, she's like, beware of this boy. And Mira is like, oh, that's Zayden whose dad led the rebellion and is responsible for killing my brother. So like the father of Zayden is responsible. That's Zayden? And Mira's like, yeah, that's Zayden. So yeah, brilliant world building that we're gonna come back to in a minute. They finally reach Parapet. So you have to cross it. People can kick you off if they want to. They can just straight up kill you. If you fall, you die. Violet says it claims around 15% of riders candidates. So yeah, so they line up there to cross Parapet, and lo and behold, Violet meets Zayden. And this is where we're treated to one of many excruciating descriptions of people, especially Zayden. And I just want to read this to you in full so you can get an idea of what the writing is like, especially when it is concerned with men, especially Zayden. He's tall, with wind-blown black hair and dark brows. The line of his jaw is strong and covered by warm, tawny skin and dark stubble. When he folds his arms across his torso, the muscles in his chest and arms ripple, moving in a way that makes me swallow. And his eyes are the shade of gold-flecked onyx. The contrast is startling, jaw-dropping even. Everything about him is. His features are so harsh that they look carved, and yet they're astonishingly perfect, like an artist worked a lifetime sculpting him, and at least a year of that was spent on his mouth. He's the most exquisite man I've ever seen, and living in the War College means I've seen a lot of men. Even the diagonal scar that bisects his left eyebrow and marks the top corner of his cheek only makes him hotter. Flaming hot. Scorching hot. Gets into trouble and you like it level of hot. Suddenly, I can't remember exactly why Mia told me not to fuck around outside my year group. This whole paragraph could stand for this entire novel, basically, because this is what Violet's descriptions and narration are like throughout the whole book, especially when it's in regards to Xaden. Now, Xaden basically looks like every YA or new NA love interest. I'm going to show you a clip here of another YouTuber's hilarious review of this book, where she made exactly the same point of how Xaden is basically exactly the same love interest as all the other love interests out there.
And if you're like, what does this bad guy Hunksicle look like? Just search any other love interest from any other super popular fantasy romance books. We'll do it together. The only notable difference between basically any of these characters is that sometimes their eye color changes. They're always going to be tan white guys. That color doesn't change, but their eyes, sure.
So, Violet finally meets Xaden for the first time. He's absolutely massive, by the way. He's like at least 6'4", which I would like to keep, which I would like you to keep in mind for my fellow European viewers. I think 6'4" is around 194, like in meters. I think something like that. Just keep that in mind, because he's huge, and she's like, remember, frail and small, because she likes to mention that she's frail and very small. Just keep that in mind for later. Now, these two meet, and how they introduce each other, like, or how they talk to each other when they first meet, is basically they give each other their family's background story, so the reader is aware of what's going on, and it feels super weird. You're General Sorrengail's youngest. His voice is deep and accusatory. You're Fen Ryerson, son, I counter, the certainty of this revelation settling in my bones. I lift my chin and do my best to lock every muscle in my body so I don't stop trembling. He will kill the second he finds out who you are. Mira's words bounce around my skull and fear knots in my throat. He's going to throw me over the edge. He's going to pick me up and drop me right off this turret. Never going to get the chance to even walk the parapet. I'll die being exactly what my mother always danced around calling me. Weak. Xaden sucks in a deep breath, and the muscle in his jaw flexes once more. Twice. Your mother captured my father and oversaw his execution. Wait, like he has the only right to hatred here? Rage races through my veins. Your father killed my older brother. Seems like we're even. Hardly. His glaring gaze strokes over me like he's memorizing every detail or looking for any weakness. Your sister's a rider. Guess that explains the leathers. Guess so. I hold this glare as if winning the staring competition will gain me entrance to the quadrant instead of crossing the parapet behind him. Either way, I'm getting across. Mira isn't going to lose both her siblings. This just feels so entirely awkward, because what this author likes to do a lot, which is something I'm going to address in the next chapter, because this is where it becomes blatantly obvious, is just really awkward world building through dialogue in a way that feels very unnatural. Like, this is sort of the best example, because these two characters have never met, and they're basically like giving each other their background story. It's like you're meeting someone and you're giving like your whole name and family history, and it feels incredibly awkward. It's like these characters are fully aware that they are in a fantasy novel and they need to give the reader information. even though no one would talk like this in real life. Absolutely no one. It feels incredibly unnatural and awkward. After that, Violet finally does the parapet. She goes onto this bridge while I think a storm is raging. There she meets another student called Rhiannon, and she sort of bonds with her. She's like, oh no, you're wearing slippery shoes. Come on, let's switch one of our shoes so we each have a good one, because I got a pair of good ones for my sister. So that sort of happens. They bond, a friendship has occurred, and then Violet finally goes onto the parapet. Now comes the most ridiculous writing mechanic for world building that I've probably ever encountered in any novel. In order to keep herself calm while she crosses the parapet, Violet's coping mechanism is reciting world building facts out loud to herself. It basically sounds like an Attenborough nature documentary in her head, while some really exciting and thrilling shit is going on around her. We're hearing nonsensical world building facts out of a textbook. And I would like to read this to you, so we get an impression of what this sounds like. I need something to keep the logical side of my brain from turning around and walking straight back to the chariot. The continent is home to 2 kingdoms, and we've been at war for 400 years, I recite, using the basic, simple data that has been drilled into me for easy recall and preparation for the scribe's test. Step after step, I make my way across the parapet. Navarre, my home, is the larger kingdom with 6 unique provinces. Tirandor, our southernmost and largest province, shares its border with the province of Krovla within the Poromial kingdom. Each word calms my breathing and steadies my heart rate, lessening the dizziness. To our east lies the remaining two Poromial provinces of Bravik and Signussen, with the Espen Mountains providing a natural border. I pass the painted line that marks halfway. I'm above the highest point now, but I can't think about that. Don't look down. Beyond Krovla, beyond our enemy, lie the distant barrens, a desert. Thunder cracks, the wind slams into me, and I flail my arms. Shit! My body sways left with the gale, and I drop to the parapet, holding onto the edges and crouching so I don't lose my footing. Making myself as small as possible as the wind howls over and around me. Stomach churning, I feel my lungs threaten to hyperventilate as panic seizes me at knife point. Within Navarre, Tirandor was the last of the bordering provinces to join the alliance and swear fealty to King Reginald. I shout into the howling wind, forcing my mind to keep moving against the very real threat of paralyzing anxiety. It's also the only province to attempt secession 627 years later, which would eventually left our kingdom defenseless had they been successful. Rhiannon's still ahead of me, but what I think is the 3/4 point. Good, she deserves to make it. The kingdom of Boromir mainly consists of arable plains and marshlands. It is known for exceptional textiles, endless fields of grain, unique crystalline gems capable of amplifying minor magics. And this was only 1 page. This goes on for several more paragraphs. You have to imagine this is a really thrilling and exciting situation. You want to hear about, how is Violet feeling, because this is a very serious, life-threatening situation. No, how about we get out some very basic, unimportant, non-relevant world building at this point. And it's also funny because this is happening while there's huge there's wind and storm sort of going on. At the same time, there's one asshole student named Jack who's trying to get to her, who's trying to kill her for no reason really. But that's just happening inside her head. So outside it's storm, and it's I'm gonna kill you. In her head it's let's talk about the 4 countries in my kingdom that I've read about just last week. And it's so fucking hilarious if you kind of think about it. And it's so lazy, because let's talk about world building here for a second. World building is one of the most important things in a fantasy novel. It's also one of the hardest things to write well in a fantasy novel. As someone who has written a high fantasy novel, I can tell this is one of the biggest problems you have. Because what you want to do with world building is you don't want to just dump it on people. You don't just want to info dump them with all the world building that you've thought of, especially at points where it is not relevant to the reader, which is exactly what is happening here. I totally understand that as a writer, you want the audience to know about all the history and all the continents, all the geography you thought of, but you have to keep in mind, how is this relevant to the reader at this point in time where you want to introduce this? And how natural does it feel to introduce it? How do you do it? Because this world building that we get here in this moment is not relevant whatsoever to what is happening in the scene. Violet is just giving us a very basic ass geography lesson, which is not relevant to what is happening. Ergo, it is not important to the reader. I read this and it immediately left my brain because I was like, okay, she's just like spouting this world building nonsense that is not really important. Also, there's a map like in front of the book. I could just like check and see, okay, this is the kingdom. This is not important. This is world building that is not important at this moment. You want to make sure that the world building you give is first off in short bursts, not like this. Don't give your readers 2 or 3 pages full of paragraphs that list world building because they're gonna get bored and they're just gonna start skimming and the information leaves their brain immediately. You want to keep it short, to the point, and relevant. Make it come up naturally. So have world building facts come up as the story progresses. When, I don't know, the character encounters something new that they don't know about. Oh, someone else tells them something about it because they know but they haven't heard of it. Then it would make sense to bring that up because maybe they ask a question about, oh, what's this place that we're actually going to go to now? Then you can bring in some world building because it is relevant to the scene at the moment. Never ever just give your readers paragraphs up on world building. Don't do that. It's very frightening to read as someone who enjoys fantasy, because your brain immediately switches off. It feels like, it feels like a 30 minutes prologue at the beginning of a fantasy movie where the movie first has to explain the world to you before you can even get into the story. You're like, oh, okay, can we just get to the story? Because the reader wants to read the story. And as the story goes on, they want to know about the world building as it is part of the story. That's what you want to do. Yaros does this in a very unnatural way, like I've mentioned, through dialogue, where people talk in a very did you know kind of conversation where it's like, oh, did you know about the war 5 years ago? And the different characters like, oh yeah, the war that was, and then they explain the whole war, and the other character's like, yeah, exactly, that war. It was really important. And you're like, if they already know, why are they talking like this? Why are characters talking like they know someone is reading a book? This is what these characters are doing. And in this case, it's used as a really lazy mechanism. Like, her coping mechanism is world building for the reader. This doesn't make sense. The thing is, this could work if it was like very, very, I don't know, specific character building, monologuing that Violet were doing right now. If this was something, I don't know, she like recites poetry that she wrote, or I don't know, she recites a story her father told her. Something like that. That would work. It's still kind of boring, but at least it's an understandable coping mechanism, and one that would, actually give her character some detail and not just turn her into a world-building fact machine. This is what happens while she crosses the parapet. Like I've mentioned, there's also there's 2 other people here that I get introduced in this scene. Rhiannon, who's this new friend that she bonds with, and also Jack, who is going to be our villain for this novel. Jack, all you need to know about Jack is he's a wanker. That's all you need to know. He's a wanker and he hates Violet for literally no reason. He sees her on the parapet and is like, "You're gonna fucking die, Soren Gale." And you're like, why? Because he's an asshole, I guess. She manages to cross the parapet. She actually threatens Jack because he's behind her. She threatens to cut him, but then doesn't do it, even though she really should have. We get a cute little line. What says cute? Interesting little line, because one of the leaders from the war college sees Violet about to that she could kill Jack, and they're like, you know, Jack, when you're in here, you need to follow the rules. We don't wait for trials here, we just execute. And you're like, that sounds kind of inefficient. And now, as we go into chapter 3, we go, flipping pages, we are in the War College now. And now, I would like to talk about the logistics of this war and the War College, because it does not make sense whatsoever. You know, when you're an editor, especially like for fantasy novels, but also in general, your job is to kind of like, you know, read novels and or like the short excerpt you've been given and analyze, you know, does this work? Does the writing style work? But also when you read like a whole novel later on that you might want to publish, where are plot holes? Does this make sense in the world the writer has created? Or is there something where I, as the editor, am like, you know what, this doesn't really make sense. There's like a logic mistake, there's a plot hole here, we need to talk about this. The thing is, sure, there can be like minor inconveniences, minor things are okay. Sometimes, you know, shit happens, or, you know, you're gonna suspend your, you're just gonna be like, okay, yeah, I can look past that because, you know, fantasy novel. But then there's shit like this War College and how this war is run by this country, where I, as an editor, would be like, this makes no sense whatsoever, and have you thought about the logistics of this? Because this is a country that has been at war for several centuries. How they even sustain themselves is beyond me, if you have a war that goes on for several centuries. But resources aren't that great, so much so that they are conscripting soldiers, as we have said. They are in dire need of soldiers, so much so that they have to conscript them, they have to force them to join the army. Why then, at almost every point in this novel, of this setting, do they kill off their potential new soldiers? It makes no sense. In order to join this war college in the first place, you have to cross a dangerous bridge. If you fall off, you die. Once you're in the college, people could kill you at any time. Once you're in the Rider Squadron, if the dragons don't like you, they will kill you. If you die during training, bad luck. If you die at some point, there's a bad luck. You could just die. You get incinerated, you get killed by one of your fellow students. It does not matter. You could get killed and die at any moment. You could die during training, you could die during one of the tasks, you could die by falling off a dragon, you could die by getting killed by a random dragon that doesn't like you, you could get killed by one of your fellow students, you could die on your way to college. Like, it is later mentioned that, like, on this first day alone, like, around 60 or 70 people have died. And you're like, if you're at war and need soldiers so desperately, why are you killing off all your potential soldiers? Sure, maybe they're not cut out to be dragon riders, but you could just, I don't know, send them off to the infantry, which is a section of the military that is mentioned several times that they have at this war college. So, I don't know, if you fail a parapet, if you fail to join the Rider Squadron, if, I don't know, at some point during your education you realize, you know, this is not for me, I would rather like to just be a scribe or just work in the normal infantry. Why can't you just do that? Why do you kill off your most valuable resource, soldiers, new soldiers, if you're at war? Why would you do that? That is utterly ridiculous and makes no sense whatsoever. The whole time while I was reading this novel, from chapter 2 onwards, I was like, why do people just let this happen? Why do people just let this happen? Because there aren't really any consequences. You know, you could die just like from falling off a dragon or something, no one's gonna bat an eye. People could just kill you in training, and the teachers are like, oh, that wasn't very nice of you, but no consequences. This is, if I read this, if I got these, let's say, first 2 or 3 chapters as an excerpt for someone who wants to like get their novel published, I would be like, this makes no sense. Did you even think this through? Because you clearly didn't. This is a huge plot hole that impacts literally the whole story, the whole society this world and this story are based on. So what are you gonna do? So yeah, this is like one of the massive plot holes this book has. That the whole basis of this war college, of this setting, makes no sense whatsoever, because this is the most inefficient military I've ever encountered in fiction. Especially since also, for military you wanna have a unit, you want to have people who they trust each other, fight together. But if you constantly have people kill each other, where it's fine to kill each other, to betray each other, and there are no consequences whatsoever, you're not creating an atmosphere of trust. People are not going to like each other, people are not going to trust each other. How is that going to go when they eventually have to go into battle together? That's not going to work out at all. So, it is this wonderful war college that Violet now joins as we go into chapter 3. And as we go into chapter 3, she meets one of her old childhood friends named Dane, and this is where we're once again treated to these wonderful, way too detailed and slightly sexualized descriptions of male characters. A tall figure in a pristine black uniform steps out of the crowd, charging towards us, and though Rhiannon manages to dodge, a stumble smack into his chest. Violet? Strong hands catch my elbows to steady me, and I look up into a pair of familiar, striking brown eyes, flared wide in obvious shock. Relief sweeps through me. I try to smile, but it probably comes out like a distorted grimace. He seems taller than he was last summer. The beard that cuts across his jaw is new, and he's filled out in a way that makes me blink. Or maybe that's just my vision going hazy at the edges. The beautiful, easygoing smile that's done away too many of my fantasies is far from the scowl that purses his mouth, and everything about him seems a little harder, but it works for him. The line of his chin, the set of his brow, even the muscles of his bicep are rigid under my fingers as I try to find my balance. Sometime in the last year, Dane just went from attractive and cute to gorgeous. Yeah, again, be prepared for like a bunch of these kinds of descriptions. Okay, so Violet has now joined the military. She's met by Dane. Dane gets her up to her room, and this is where we first find out about the magic powers in this world. I'm not supposed to be up here, obviously. I tuck in a little closer. Don't worry, if someone sees us, I'll just say that I was overcome with lust at first sight and couldn't wait another second to go get you out of your pants. He snorts as he drops my pack in front of a wooden door, then makes a twisting motion with his hand in front of the handle. A lock audibly clicks. You have powers, I say. It's not news, of course. He's a second-year rider, and all riders can perform lesser magics once their dragons choose to channel their power. But it's Dane. Okay, so this is where we sort of get our first hint at that when you bond with these dragons, you get magical powers. Apparently, there are like some major powers, like your main power, and then there's also like some slightly like lesser magic powers, like these ones where I'm like, cool, you can open doors now. Also use a pen. At some point it's mentioned that you need magic, dragon magic, to use pens. How that makes sense, I have no idea. So Dane is of course very worried about Violet because he knows her from childhood days onwards. He knows that she's very frail, not physically, adapt for this kind of harsh training. So he immediately wants to get her out of there. He wants to set her up for the scribe college again. He's trying to come up with a plan to get her back into the scribe quadrant, which is going to be quite difficult. And she refuses because she's like, no, Mum's gonna find out. I'm not really sure. Also, I've made it now, so let's see what happens. And this is something that's going to come back later, but this is already where I was like, why wouldn't you just take this option? Where in chapter 3, literally like 20 pages ago, you did not want this. You want to be a scribe, you want to survive. Please take this option to just be a scribe. Why wouldn't you want to do that? It's disappointing, angering your mother. or die. I know which option I would choose. So all the students meet at the academy now in the courtyard. It says that around 300 people have survived the parapet, 301 people have survived, 67 people died on the first day. There are roughly around 500 students at this college, to sort of give you some numbers. This is why I would shortly like to go into, to look at my notes, into what the structure of this college is, because holy wow, is it way too complicated. So, in case you've been wondering why this book is called Fourth Wing, it's called that because Fourth Wing is one of the departments of this school. And if you thought, okay, cool, there's a college, then there's going to be like the different wards, scribe ward, rider's quadrant, scribe quadrant, rider's quadrant, infantry, and healers. I think those are the ones, I don't know. And then they have, year 1, year 2, year 3, that. So here's like a description, and then you try to make sense of it, of what I thought is way, overcomplicating it. So the novel is set at a war college called Basgiath War College. At the college, there are 4 quadrants: riders, scribes, healers, and infantry. The riders quadrant has 4 wings. Each wing is led by a wing leader, and each wing has 3 sections: flame, claw, and tail, which are then led by an individual section leader. And each section has 4 squads, which are led by individual squad leaders. Why would you make this so complicated? Why? Just, I don't know, have it be... Okay, there are the 4 quadrants, that makes completely sense. Like, riders, scribes, healers, infantry, makes sense. Then you could just... The riders quadrant has 4 wings. Okay, yeah, fine, because you want to call it 4th wing. I don't know, yeah, okay. That's all you need. Because you also have first year, second year, third year students. That's it. You could have... Riders quadrant has 4 wings, and then there's like a year. There's first years in wing 2. There's second years in wing 4. That's it. That's all you need. Why do you have... Each wing has 3 sections, and a section has 4 squads? There aren't that many riders if there are only 500 people in the courtyard. Why would you make it this complicated? There are like several leading positions. You're like, which one is like, who's superior? Is it even important? Not really. But you're also like trying to make sort of sense of this while you're reading, and you're like, why? Why? Just why? We're at this war college now. Violet is, of course, moved to 4th wing, as the novel is called, and lo and behold, coincidentally, this is the wing which has the squad leader, Zayden Ryerson. So, of course, these two have to know each other and get close to each other. During this, selection thing, this is also where we get our first glimpse at what the dragons are going to be like in this book. There are 3 dragons in various shades of red, 2 shades of green, like Tane, Mira's dragon, 1 brown, like Mom's, 1 orange, and the enormous navy one ahead of me. They're all massive, overshadowing the structure of the citadel as they narrow their golden eyes at us in absolute judgment. If they didn't need us puny humans to develop signet abilities from bonding and weave the protective wards they power around Nabare, I'm pretty sure they'd eat us all and be done. But they like protecting the Vale, the valley behind Basgiath the dragons call home. For merciless griffins, and we like living, so here we are, in the most unlikely of partnerships. Oh, in case you've been wondering, this is the only ever description or explanation we'll get for why the bonding between dragons and humans happened, and it's not really that detailed or clear why this is happening. So the dragons basically only are ever described by color and occasionally by the shape of their tails. Spike tail, spear tail, I don't know, like that. That's all you ever get. Later it's mentioned how big they are. I think it's mentioned that they're like 25 feet tall. Which, to be fair, is tall, but personally I thought they were gonna be even bigger. It's not, I don't know. This is, for a book that's about dragons, personally I think very uncreative. If you're only going to describe the dragons by color, size, and the shape of their tail. These dragons are mostly defined as by, the big blue one. There I saw a green one my friend has. There is the small red one. And nothing is done with that. Like, you don't get really cool, detailed descriptions of these dragons at any point in this novel. There aren't like really specific dragons that can do like really cool shit, like D&D dragons. You know, there aren't like, I don't know, ice dragons that can spit ice. There aren't like acid dragons that can spit acid. There aren't like dragons who look like kind of fucked up because their powers are fucked up. Well, there aren't really like elegant looking dragons because they have like really special powers, or are like dragon royalty or something. I feel like there's so much potential here to make this fun and interesting, to really get into like, how do certain dragons look? How does their biology work? You know, how does that have to do with their powers they manifest? But there's nothing like that in this book at any point, as we will see. So, the next couple of chapters are, Violet at the War College. We learn that Xaden has like a really biggish, I think, blue dragon called Scale, but it's written in a like funny way. All these characters do when they talk to each other is sort of like making sex jokes. Like Rhiannon and Violet do a lot of sex jokes, which isn't helped by the fact that Rhiannon is, bisexual and sleeps around a lot, which, is a stereotype I don't think anyone likes. So yeah, this only adds to like this really juvenile feeling you get while reading. In chapter 5, we're starting to get into like some first lessons, like some first classes. And the first lesson we sort of get is like a war update. I don't remember what they're actually called, but they have like a daily sort of like briefing session on what is happening in the war, where they sort of like talk about war updates or tactics or what they could do. At this point, this would be a really good point for some world building, where you could, talk a bit about the history of the war if you want to bring that up. The thing is, the novel never does this. We never really know what this war is about at any point. We're only like sort of told which two countries are at war for how long. And that's sort of it. There are like no details as to why these countries are at war, like what's at stake, what are they fighting for. It's not really made clear at any point. And I'm like, this is what this whole story is about, that they're at war, and I don't even know what the war is about. So what the hell are you doing? So we move on to some other lessons. Oh, by the way, the lessons that are taught at this college aren't really that helpful. The only sort of lessons these people have at the Rider Squadron are, these war briefing sessions, combat training, and dragon training. Only one of these happens on a daily basis. And it's not the dragon riding, it's the war briefing, I think. Could also be it's the combat training. It's definitely not the dragon riding, which should definitely be the daily session, considering this is the one thing they're supposed to be good at. But no. In case you're wondering, what about, I don't know, learning war strategies, fighting techniques, how do you treat wounded soldiers? What about, some basic history knowledge? Just some background info that could be really useful. No classes like that taught at this college. All you need to know is how to punch well and burn people with your dragons. That's all you need to know and nothing else. So we move on to combat training. And this is where, for the first time, I had to question, how do men get depicted in this novel? Because Violet is, well, I guess thirsty. She's very thirsty, and let's just be honest, she's fucking horny. She's very horny, especially for Zayden, as we'll realize. But this is sort of the first moment at this first combat class where it becomes clear that Violet has a sort of like kind of sexualized, objectified view of the men at the college. The guys are mostly shirtless because they think shirts give their opponents something to grab onto. Personally, I'm not arguing with their logic, just enjoying the view. Respectfully, of course, which means keeping my eyes on my own squad's mat and off the other 20 mats in the massive gym that consumes the first floor of the academic wing. Yeah, so the men are apparently shirtless half the time. Also, because they think shirts give their opponent something to grab onto. The women don't have shirts. I mean, they could grab the women's shirts, I guess. Or do the women also not get... I don't know what the logic is here. It's honestly just so Violet can stare at men, which will happen often in this book, and it's going to feel increasingly more uncomfortable as the novel goes on. So during this training, Jack, remember, random asshole for no reason, happens to kill a guy. He just like breaks his neck straight up in front of everyone, in front of a teacher, and the teacher's like, "Hey, you shouldn't be doing that." And Jack is like, "Oh, I should." It's literally what he says. He's like, "What? How should I have known that his neck is like so frail and could break so easily?" And the teacher's like, "Well, don't do it again. No consequences whatsoever." It's just there to establish once again that Jack is an asshole who is out there to kill Violet for no reason. Violet's bone gets broken during training because, as we remember, she's small and very frail, so she's sent to the infirmary, to the healer's quadrant, where she gets patched up. I think also briefly meets with Mira, I'm not quite sure. But it's at this point that Violet receives a book from her deceased brother. A book which so happens to contain useful Dragon Rider info, advice, and tips. The thing is, this book is never really gonna play a role. You get like you have like quotes at the beginning of every chapter, and sometimes there is a quote from the book from the brother, from Brannon. But there's never like, as far as I remember, not ever really a moment in the book where, Violet mentions, "Oh, I do this during training because I've read about it in the book and it was a useful tip." That never happens. So I'm wondering why is this book even here? No idea. We move into chapter 7. More lessons are happening. But what is important now is that Violet has to fight some people during combat training, and of course she realizes she can't possibly win in a normal way because, again, remember, she's small and frail. So she decides to poison her opponents. And she needs to gather some ingredients for that. So she goes out to do that, I think in the middle of the night, and like climb some trees. And then she happens to not really run into, but a meeting happens. Coincidentally, the meeting of students happens at the exact same spot where she just climbed up a tree. What a coincidence, but I guess it happened. This is where all the rebel kids meet. Because, as we find out during this beginning part, first couple of chapters of the novel, Zayden is one of the rebel kids, meaning at a point in time, like a couple of years ago, there was a rebellion. What exactly that was about is not made clear, but they rebelled, but the military cut down all the rebellion, and they killed all the parents, and now it gets interesting, and forced the kids of the rebels to join the military, especially the Riders Quadrant. And now all of these rebel kids are meeting up at school. Let's come back to how the War College makes no sense for a minute. If you have rebels in your society that have, very good reason to hate you because, you killed their parents, why would you send these children to military school where they can gain military intel and have access to your most powerful weapons, namely dragons? Why would you give the rebellion kids this kind of access to very powerful stuff? Again, makes no sense whatsoever why you would do that. Makes no sense. And of course now all the rebel kids are meeting up at school and Violet happens to hear their conversation. For some reason, she's not like, this is really concerning, I should tell someone about this because, the rebels are probably planning another rebellion. She's like, nah, they could possibly do that, right? Nah, that's probably not gonna happen. So, yeah, the rebel kids meet up, Violet listens in, and coincidentally, like the students that meet up there, like very casually reveal some very specific dates and numbers regarding their own operation and their group, which I thought was kind of hilarious. So they say, like, very casually and very naturally, we've done this for 2 years and they've never found out. Satan responds, folding his arms and leaning back against the limb below my right. They're not going to unless one of you tells, and if you tell, I'll know. The threat is obvious in his tone. Like Garrick said, we've already lost 2 first years to their own negligence. There are only 41 of us in the Rider Squadron. We don't want to lose any of you, but we will if you don't help yourselves. The odds are always stacked against us, and trust me, every other Navarian in the Quadrant will look for reasons to call you a traitor or force you to fail. So, very, very natural conversation here. The meeting spurs to end. Violet thinks she's in the clear, but of course she is not. Xaden noticed her. This is where we find out Xaden's power. I give you 3 guesses what the tall, dark, brooding, mysterious bad boy, what his fantasy power is. It's shadow powers. Because, of course, it's bloody shadow powers. Yeah, so he basically picks her up with shadow power. At this point, Violet thinks, oh fuck, this guy's gonna kill me because, he hates me because, my mom killed his dad and, my sisters warned me about this guy. He's probably going to kill me now, but if you think this could keep Violet from thinking that her potential killer is sexy, you've thought wrong, because of course she can do that. My breath abandons me with a sharp exhale. He has the kind of power that could end me without him having to so much as lift a finger. Shadow wielding. The futility of even trying to defend myself against him is laughable. I hate how beautiful he is, how lethal his abilities make him as he strides towards me, shadow curling around his footsteps. He's like one of those poisonous flowers I've read about from the Cygnus forest to the east. His allure is a warning not to get too close, and I'm definitely too close. This is one of many instances where Violet, for some reason, feels the need to mention that the men around her, especially Xaden, are hot. Violet will go on to constantly mention that Xaden is hot whenever he's in a scene with her. There's no scene in this book where these 2 characters are in the same room and Violet does not comment on how sexy Xaden is. It's bloody insane. Like, okay, I'm not the biggest romance fan. I'm also asexual, so maybe you can also put it down to that, not the biggest fan of, horniness in books. But, I get it. People find other people sexy. They're horny. It's a romance book. I get it. But this girl cannot keep it in her pants at any time. She always has to mention how god fucking beautiful this man is, how beautiful and sexy Xaden is, at times where it feels entirely inappropriate. Like this, she's about to die. She thinks he is going to kill her. And she's like, oh, but he's so beautiful. Stuff like this happens all the time. It feels unrelated and feels completely unnatural. They're fighting she will think, oh, he's sexy when he kills people. Their training, she will be like, oh, I get distracted because I'm watching Zayden fight because he's so sexy with, his shirtless upper body. They're in the middle of she's in the middle of a conversation with someone else. She happens to notice Zayden walking by, and she's like, I can't focus on the concentration because Zayden with his beautiful fucking face is walking past. And you're like, masturbate. Do something about it. Just get a hold on your horniness, woman. It's quite frankly problematic. Like, what the hell? This happens throughout the book. Just, keep that in mind. As do the sex jokes. Like, we go after this meeting, this nightly meeting, where, of course, Aiden doesn't kill her. We go into chapter 8, which literally also, again, starts with, sex jokes and sex narration of Violet, because Rhiannon sleeps around, because she's bisexual, and that's what the bisexuals do, I guess. And Violet literally says, at least one of us is getting a few much-needed orgasms. And you read lines like that, and you're like, you can't be serious, can you? You just can't make that shit up. In this chapter, it is mentioned in one of the lessons, what some of the dragons are, and it is mentioned that the black dragon, because of course the black dragon, is the most powerful and biggest and most badass dragon of them all, and no one has seen him in ages. Guess what kind of dragon Violet will bond with later? Wink, wink, wink. Foreshadowing, it's very obvious. Wink, wink, wink. This whole stuff happens, Violet manages to poison her opponents, several of them, and of course, luckily, no one ever thinks that's weird that all of Violet's opponents mysteriously fall ill right before they have to fight her. No one thinks that's strange whatsoever. But eventually, she ends up with Zayden in combat practice. They're fighting, and this is where Zayden decides to come up with the nickname. Because every romantasy needs a stupid nickname for the female character. And hold on to your horses, because Zayden's nickname for Violet is Violence. Because he's like, oh, you are a violent thing, aren't you? You're out for blood today in combat training, so I'm gonna call you Violence. And she's like, my name is Violet. And you're like, oh, God. In which world, in which reality, is Violence a serious nickname that you can use and say out loud to the person you're interested in romantically in a unironic, serious way? How? Violence is such a ridiculous nickname. Also, it makes no sense because Violet has not been violent at all up until this point, and she won't be until the very last few chapters of the novel. You just can't take this seriously as a nickname. Also because every time he says the name Violence for her, it sounds weird because it sounds so strange because he would be like, oh, you look really nice in the dress, Violence. And you can't even say that because you're like, Violence. You're like, this is what this sounds like in my head while I'm reading. It's absolutely ridiculous. So they're fighting, he gives her the nickname Violence. She keeps using very strange expressions to tell the reader how sexy Zayden is, something like beautiful fucking asshole. Should we talk about the full stop sentences at this point? We'll give it a minute. We're gonna come back to these kinds of full stop punctuated speech sentences. He's teaching her combat lesson. All she can think about is being horny and having sex with him, even though she doesn't know anything about him and still thinks at this point he wants to kill her. So, yeah. After that, Dane comes back and he offers her once again a deal where he could send Violet back to the scribe quadrant. Markham says that he'll put you through the first year without telling your mother. By the time she finds out, you'll already be inducted as a scribe. There's nothing she can do after that. He lifts his other hand so he's holding my face between both palms, tipping it up towards his. Please, if you won't do it for yourself, then do it for me. My heart stutters, and I sway, his reasoning tugging me towards exactly what he's suggesting. But you've made it this far, a part of me whispers. I can't lose you, Violet, he whispers, resting his forehead against mine. I just can't. I squeeze my eyes shut. This is my way out, and yet I don't want to take it. Just promise me you'll think about it, he begs. We still have 4 weeks until threshing, just think about it. The hope in his tone and the tender way he holds me cuts through my defenses. Why, at this point, she still doesn't want to just go to the scribe quadrant? No idea. She's almost died several times. She thinks and knows that there are several people out there who hate her and want to kill her. Several people have already died or been killed in her direct proximity. And yet she's like, I just don't know if I should do that. I'm like, why are you even questioning this? You've literally almost died several times. Just take the out and go to the scribe quadrant. Just do it. Why won't you do it? Now we're like around chapter 10 and 11. We just straight up skip about 2 months of training. We just skip several training sessions. We are told that they are training for what is called the Gauntlet, which is basically like a hardcore obstacle course that they'll have to survive in order to, advance in their studies. They're training for that. We don't really see any of that training. We're just told 2 months pass, and now Violet is sort of good at it. Which is, I have to say, something the author keeps doing a lot. Skips training sessions, skips interesting bits where you're like, cool, this is where we could use some time to, develop the school, develop Violet as a character, see some of that training she's going through. We don't really get any of that. The novel will occasionally tease you with some, interesting training sessions or bonding sessions with the dragons or some other cool shit. And then the novel just skips that and we're told, I have improved. And you're just sitting there like, cool. Would have been nice if we had seen any of that development. So by chapter 11, we have skipped several training sessions. By now, Violet nails the training for the Gauntlet. Sort of go into these training sessions. The Gauntlet is coming up. Dane, once again, before the Gauntlet happens, is like, once again, he's like, please leave. I don't want you to get hurt. You're weaker than the others. You're frail. You're physically weaker than the other people. I don't want you to get hurt. I've arranged this for you. Please just go to the scribe quadrant. You are not qualified to do this. And you know what? Even though he's kind of annoyingly insistent about it, he's also kind of right. But Violet is like, no, I don't want to do that. And she says, yeah, well, maybe I'm a writer now. And you're like, since when? What has changed? Has something changed in those 2 months of training that, we could have read about? That would have detailed some of that character development? No, not really, so let's read what it says. I don't know if I can watch, Dane says, drawing my attention back to his strong face. His perfectly trimmed beard, brackets full lips drawn tight into a frown. Then close your eyes. I have a plan. A shitty one, but it's worth a try. What changed between Parapet and now? Dane asks again, a wealth of emotions in his eyes that I can't begin to interpret. Well, except the fear. That doesn't need any interpretation. Me. You just ask yourself while you're reading this, how has she changed? Because at this point, she hasn't changed as a character whatsoever. She's still close to dying at any given moment. She has, maybe 1 or 2 friends. Her childhood friend is being very annoying and has a crush on her that she doesn't reciprocate. Xaden is sexy, I guess. But remember, she still thinks he wants to kill her. She has tricked her way through college so far. Hasn't really improved upon her training. And she's like, I've changed. I'm a writer now. Why? I'm not gonna explain. So yeah, the book just tells you. The book just tells you Violet has changed now. We skipped over all the time where we could have detailed some of that character progression. So forget about, just accept it. We're literally telling you she has changed. So accept it. The gauntlet happens, and if you thought you're going to read about the whole gauntlet session, you know, the agonizing way in which she has to conquer this obstacle course, forget it. We're jumping straight into the final part of the obstacle course, because this author hates writing interesting things. So we immediately jump into like the third or fourth stage of the gauntlet of the ascent. Like, why do we not get the whole journey? It would have been really interesting to know, read about the whole experience, and it's said to be very deadly and cool and interesting, but no. Violet gets through it with, she kind of cheats, I guess. She like uses one of her daggers to get up the final obstacle, to pass the final obstacle, and people are like, no, she can't do that. She can't use like extra material, like no tools. And she's like, oh, they're so in love with the codex. So like the rulebook. They're so in love with the codex. They just want to use it all the time to throw me out. But then guess what? She literally quotes the codex to explain what she just did. So she just says, you know, no, it's allowed because everything that you carried on your person when you came into the college is part of your person, so you're allowed to use it. And this is one of the daggers I had on me the first day I arrived here, so ergo I'm allowed to use it. And that's how she gets through the gauntlet, I guess. Our Zayden is also in the scene. Of course, once again, she can only think about how hot she is, even though she's in a very serious situation where people are questioning her. She could get potentially executed, and she's like, oh, it should be against codex to look that good while and be so ruthless at the same time. You're like, oh my god, check your priorities. This is not what's important right now. Chapter 12. They are now preparing for threshing. Threshing is where they auto bond with their dragons. Before that happens, they sort of have like a presentation where the dragons all line up, and the students also sort of line up and walk past the dragons. The students can look at the dragons, but the dragons also judge the students' character. This is very dangerous because if the dragons do not like you, or if you talk shit about them, they can incinerate you right then and there. So the best thing to do is just walk past the dragons, don't do stupid shit, don't swear, don't say anything silly or stupid, and just walk past the dragons. That's all you have to do. So this is where we meet the dragons. The dragons here just mentioned that they are on average 25 feet tall, which I will reiterate, I don't think is that big for a dragon, as I personally think. You know what some of the students do, as Violet and some of her friends and other people walk past the dragons? They talk shit. Because there's one dragon that looks a bit different. It's a tiny yellow dragon. And I'll read you like this short excerpt of what they talk about when they see this dragon. My jaw drops as I take in the sharp teeth and quick, darting movements of its head as it studies us. At its full height, it's probably only a few feet taller than I am, like a perfect miniature of the brown next to it. I walk straight into Tannen's back and startle. We've reached the end of the path where the rest of the squad has been waiting. Get off me, Sorringale! Tannen hisses and shoves me back. Who the hell would bond that thing? My chest tightens. They can hear you, I remind him. It's fucking yellow! Luca points right at the dragon, disgust curling her lip. So not only is it obviously too small to carry right in battle, but it's not even powerful enough to be a real colour. Maybe it's a mistake, Sawyer says quietly. Maybe it's a baby orange. It's full grown, Rhiannon argues. There's no way the other dragons allow a baby to bond. No human alive has ever seen a baby. It's a mistake, all right. Tina looks at the golden one and scoffs. So yeah, apparently these people think it's a good idea to talk shit about this one tiny dragon that's there. Like, that's a good idea, because You know, that's what they've been told exactly not to do. Guess what happens? One of the guys gets incinerated. Weirdly enough, I don't think the guy who directly talked shit about the dragon, but just like some rando in front of Violet gets incinerated by one of the dragons, dies. Let's talk about this one yellow dragon. So what would you think if you, among these other big ass dragons, you saw a small dragon, a small yellow dragon, which is described to have like fluffy bits. It's kind of small and frail. Doesn't really have claws, but sort of more paws. Your first thought would probably be baby dragon. It's definitely going to be a baby dragon. And even these people are like, could be a baby dragon, but immediately are like, nah, no one's ever seen a baby dragon. The yellow dragon turns out to be a baby dragon. Big surprise. Yeah. We move on to chapters 13 and 14. Thrashing is about to happen very soon. All the first year students go out on the day of thrashing to find a dragon to bond with. For some unexplained reason, Jack, resident arsehole and wanker and twat of this book, and some plus ones have decided they should kill the yellow dragon. Because they're like, it's weak, and therefore it deserves to die, even though all of these other dragons could incinerate us if they find out. But we are going out of our way to kill this tiny dragon, even though we should bond with some dragons ourselves. How is this going to help anyone is not made clear at all, especially since it's mentioned several times that, dragons are like the big thing in this world. They're like above humans, kind of. And they could kill you at any time. And now Jack is like, we should kill one of those dragons because he's small and yellow. And apparently, for some reason, yellow is not a proper color for a dragon. What that means, no idea. So Violet is like, oh no, I need to save the baby dragon. So she goes and follows Jack to stop him and the other guys from killing the baby dragon. Surprisingly, despite her being physically much weaker, but remember she's small, therefore fast, she manages to fight off 3 dudes. And, despite broken bones and chronic pain, she just, as she always does, she just pushes through the pain, and that means you win. But of course, Xaden arrives on his dragon, even though he's not allowed to interfere. He doesn't really interfere. He just lands next to the group and talks to Jack to, I guess, distract him, so Violet can save the baby dragon. But then, lo and behold, a giant ass dragon appears, basically like this motherfucker. Giant ass black dragon. Remember the black dragon? He turns up. And of course, he decides right then and there to bond with Violet. Because of course our main character gets the biggest, most baddest dragon there is. When I first read the introduction scene for the dragon, how he introduces himself, I kind of had to laugh a bit because the names sound, at first, if you don't know, they sound really funny. So, apologies for my pronunciation, but I just kind of want to show you what this is like when the dragon introduces himself for the first time. My name is Tirnanach, son of Mordkadim and Flaklanfool, descended from the cunning Duchmandin line. He stands to his full height, bringing me eye level with the canopy of trees around the clearing, and I squeeze a little tighter with my thighs. But I'm not going to assume that you'll be able to remember that once we reach the field, so turn will do, until I inevitably have to remind you. First of this is kind of the only time the dragon will talk this old-fashionedly middle-age-ish, medieval-ish throughout the novel. First I thought, did someone just high-five the keyboard to come up with some names? But no, that was my mistake. These names are, I think, Celtic, actually. And when I found that out, I was like, oh, cool. And then I was like, weird. Why would the dragons have Celtic names? Do the dragons speak a Celtic language? Did they give themselves Celtic names? Do they not have, their own dragon language and they give themselves names in that dragon language? When did they learn to speak Celtic? I don't know, but that's what we're getting. We have Terran now, who is the big giant ass motherfucker black dragon, who bonds with Violet. They try to fly. Violet literally falls off seconds after they started flying, which is kind of funny. Terran catches her. He's kind of aware of the fact that, you know, she has problems physically. But that's not a problem because, as Terran literally says, Violet is the smartest character and the most cunning character. So she deserves to bond with him. But of course there's still the little yellow golden baby dragon. And guess what? She can talk too. Her name's Andarna. And guess what? She also bonds with Violet, because Violet is special. So she doesn't only get one dragon. No, she gets two dragons. One of them is the most baddest, epic, legendary dragon anyone's ever seen. And the other one is the most adorable, cute, fucking shit dragon that also no one has seen because it's a baby. Yay! I mean, I kind of get that, you know, she's a main character, you know, main characters often get privileges. It's, you know, it's kind of hard to avoid because they're special. But how many, like, main character privileges Violet gets in this book, it's kind of insane. We're going to chapter 16. This is where we find out that her dragon, Terran, is the mate of Xaden's dragon, of course. So the dragons are a mated pair, which means Violet and Xaden have to sort of be in constant proximity to one another, because that's how dragon couples work. I guess it's not really explained how or why. It's just they need to stay close, otherwise they, you know, feel the distance. It's at this point, halfway through the novel, that Violet finally realizes, you know, maybe Xaden doesn't want to kill me. And I'm like, really? It's not like he had several opportunities to kill you and he didn't. And he very clearly never did anything like serious to like stop you from what you were doing. At this point, they still don't really like each other, but for some reason, Violet is already kind of in love with him, apparently, because Xaden is like, you know, I don't really want to be bonded with you, but I guess that's how it is because of our dragons, and Violet is like, oh no, I'm heartbroken, how could he say that? I don't want you to be trained to me, I didn't do this. Ouch, it takes all the willpower in my body not to reach for my chest and make sure he didn't just rip out my heart out from behind my ribs, which makes absolutely zero sense, since I feel the same way about him. He's the son of the great betrayer. His father was directly responsible for Brennan's death. So, yeah, Violet, again, it's a scene with Violet and Xaden, so Violet has to be like, oh no, I hate him, but also sexy. And she's already like, heartbroken, even though I hate him. And you're like, okay, yeah, I guess that's how feelings work. There's kind of like a little altercation between like Dane and Xaden, because Xaden sort of stepped in to help and Dane didn't, because it's actually forbidden to like step in during threshing. And Xaden is like, would you really level an accusation knowing it would have been what saved the woman you call your best friend? My gaze flies to Dane, and a silent, damning moment passes. It's a simple question, yet I find myself holding my breath for his answer. What do I really mean to him? There are rules. Dane tilts his chin to look Xaden in the eyes. And out of curiosity, would you have let's say, bent those rules to save your precious little Violet in that field? His voice ices over as he studies Dane's expression with rapt fascination. And of course, Dane is like, no, I wouldn't really have done that. And Violet is like, how dare you? And I was like, you know, Xaden didn't really do that either. He wasn't allowed to step in either. He just like flew in and landed next to you, but it's not like he actively did something to save you. So I don't really know what we're talking about here. Nevertheless, Dane is really excited for her that she managed to get through this. And Dane actually kisses her in that moment for the first time. This is where she ultimately realizes she felt nothing romantically for this boy, as if it wasn't already made very clear to us. We move on to chapter 17. Violet is being horny as always, with lines such as "so freaking beautiful," because these full stop punctuated speech sentences don't ever stop. This is where, maybe this is at this point, like halfway through the novel, this is maybe why I'm going to talk about this briefly. This author really likes to use these sort of like punctuated speech patterns a lot. You know, like, what the hell? So fucking beautiful. So fucking hot. Sentences like that appear like at least 3 to 5 times in every single chapter. And it got so bloody annoying after a while. Like, seriously, first off, it adds to like this sort of like juvenile vibe you get from the writing, that people are talking like this, like, you know, what the hell? You didn't mean that. Take that back. And you're like, oh my god, shut the fuck up. It just feels so unnatural to read stuff like this in a fantasy novel, first of all. And second of all, it just gets annoying. I get that you want to use this to like maybe make a point during like dialogue or something. But if you overuse this, it just becomes annoying to the reader and it loses all of its meaning as a literary device. Because it would work if you only use this like very sparingly for like very important scenes where Violet really wants to emphasize what she's feeling right now, that she's upset about something, for example. But she uses this all the time, especially when she's horny for Xaden. You know, stuff like, so fucking beautiful. They're like, oh, can you just stop talking like this? Please, no one talks like this. Especially not, and keep this in mind, 20-year-olds. These people are 20 years old and they all talk like 14-year-old teenagers who just learned how to swear and be horny. This keeps going on, especially since, you know, the dragons, Xaden's and Violet's dragons, are now bonded. They are a mated pair. And this is where, you know, some of the emotional romancy drama, I guess, is coming. Because, you know, as we'll find out soon, the dragons make her feel things. But I'll let you ponder on that for another few minutes before we get to that. So, Violet is now learning how to handle her dragon. We don't really get that many actual training sessions with her dragon. Her dragon's like sort of just like mentally talks to her all the time, occasionally. You don't get to see the dragons that often, also not for training or anything else. A lot of people like fall from dragons all the time during training. It's kind of funny because at some point it's mentioned that Violet fell off her dragon like 36 times during training when she first tried it. And I just imagine it's kind of funny that you're like having a conversation at the War College and you just hear like constant screams from Violet as she keeps falling down every 5 seconds. It's just like, hey, how are you doing? And in the background it's like, ah, ah, and you're like, oh my god, this must be so hilarious. The thing is, her dragon, you know, is very nice. Like Tern keeps her sort of magically bonded to himself. Saddles are not a thing, apparently, for this rider's quadrant. It has existed for centuries and has, you know, learned how to ride dragon for centuries. Why do they not all get saddles? Why don't all dragons magically keep their riders on their backs? Do they not like them all as much as Tern does Violet? No idea. Apparently they all just have to hold on to naked, bare, slippy dragon scale skin. Try doing that while the dragon is doing wild loop-de-loops and barrel rolls. No matter how much upper arm strength you have, that is impossible. So no wonder like half of the people are dying by falling off their dragons. A month goes by, nothing happens. In this War College of Death where people die and dragons need training, nothing happens within a month, apparently. Dane once again tries to convince Violet to, you know, go to the scribe quadrant, that she's too weak, that she shouldn't be doing this, and Violet gives him like a really stern talking to, and finally is like, you know what, you think I'm just frail and weak, but you know what, I've really improved, and you know, you can fuck up with all this stuff you've been talking about. And Dane, my boy, he was not given a chance in this book. He's just there to make Xaden look better. Cause yeah, Dane is never given a chance. He's just like sort of a wimpy love interest who's like, oh no, you're frail and weak and I want to take care of you and you really shouldn't be doing this. I want you to be safe. And sure, it's partly annoying, but also he's kind of right. To a certain degree, Violet is just too weak compared to the other ones. And he just wants to help her. But Xaden, who, as we will find out, also just kind of protects Violet, wants to keep her safe, but I guess it's fine because he's hot. But Xaden is good. Xaden is good because he's sexy, and he's the definitive love interest, so Dane has to look bad. So yeah, Dane gets a really stern talking to by Violet, that sort of seals the deal on that relationship. It's around this point in the novel where the magic powers start to manifest, because as I've mentioned previously, when you start bonding with the dragons, you start manifesting a magic power. Now, what the exact magic system is for these powers is never really made clear. Like, people start manifesting all kinds of powers. Like, someone becomes an airbender. Xaden can wield shadows. Someone can do telepathy. Some people can do telekinesis. Some people can bend metal. Some people can do astral projection. And you're like, but how does it work? Does it like correspond directly to the dragon? Does it correspond to the dragon color? Does it correspond to the specific rider-dragon bond? Are there like rules? Because it's also mentioned that some powers are more rare than others, but everyone in this book has a different power. There's like no power that exists twice in this book. So you're like, what are the rules? The rules are never made clear. It's never really explained how these powers manifest, what the rules are, where they come from. It's just mentioned, you know, if you bond with a dragon, you get magical powers. I guess they sort of come from the dragon, but it's not really made clear how that works, what like the distribution rules are, basically. What are the rules here? Also, for some reason, some magic skills are declared illegal. So like in chapter 18, at this point in the story, there's a guy who suddenly manifests the power to read minds. He has no control over when this power manifests within him. He has no control of the power itself, because, you know, it suddenly hits him. He's never had this power before, so he's not really in control of it as it happens. And he has no control over what power he gets. It is decided immediately that this man should be killed because he has mind-reading powers. Because reading minds is an illegal power to have, so he gets killed. There's no time taken to, you know, take this man aside, to calm him down so the power stops manifesting. There's no time taken to teach this man maybe how to use his powers so that he stops reading everyone's mind. No, it's immediately declared that this troubled man, who had no choice in what power he would get or when he would get it, that he would immediately get killed. Why that is such a big deal is never made clear, especially since there are characters that can read minds. Dane has mind-reading powers. The only difference is that he needs to physically touch you, and then he can read your most recent memories. Why is that not illegal, but basic mind-reading powers are? It's later, I think, mentioned that they are worried about people finding out, you know, military intelligence secrets. You know, knowing stuff they shouldn't know, like letting in, I don't know, people with ulterior motives, that kind of stuff. But guess what? You already have people like that because you let the rebellion kids into your military who have access to your military intel and could stage a coup, potentially. You already have people like this, and they don't even have mind-reading powers. So, yeah, I guess random powers illegal. Cool. Violet goes to bed at the end of this day, and of course, as it happens in these books, she gets attacked in the middle of the night, even though that's illegal, as we have been told in the very beginning of the novel. She gets attacked, almost murdered. Andarna, the little baby dragon, sweeps in, and suddenly, time stop. Time stops. And Violet, is just cheating it out of the room, out of her bedroom. Several things happen in this scene that I questioned. First off, Violet has literal plot armor because Mira, at the beginning of the novel, gave her a armor, a sort of like corset-like armor, made out of dragon scale, so it's extra durable, it's safe. Apparently Violet is wearing, with her frail body, is wearing this corset armor while she sleeps. This is apparently no health concern whatsoever. If you wear a corset armor that, straps down your sort of wrist and chest while you sleep, it's no health concern whatsoever. But of course it also happens to save her life that night. So literal plot armor. Then, time stop happens. Of course, the bloody fucking baby dragon has a power like stopping time. It's not like Violet already got the special treatment with, 2 dragons. One of them being super badass motherfucker legendary dragon, one being a baby dragon. No, the baby dragon also has literal time-bending powers. So the baby dragon stops time, which gives Violet enough time to sort of cheese it out of the room. Xaden, at the same time, comes in. Xaden kills immediately everyone in the room with shadow powers. And as this very serious moment is happening, Violet was about to be murdered. Xaden comes in and mass murders 9 people. Violet is like, he's hot. You can't be serious. You can't be serious. This is once again one of those moments where this is not the right time for horniness. Okay? It's just not the right time. So she manages to sort of cheat it out of there. It is only now, 5 chapters later, after she has bonded this baby dragon, almost 5 chapters after she's bonded this baby dragon, that they realize it's a hatchling. It's actually a baby, because Andana just straight up, dragons straight up tell them that this is a baby, and they're like, no. And you're like, yeah, also apparently Violet, for being so smart, did not realize time was stopping. It's made very clear within the narration that time stops. And that she's sort of aware of this. And she just legs it out of the room and is, paragraphs later, is like, did time just stop or what happened? And you're like, you did not get that? You need to be so basically told? I thought that was very clear and you were aware of that. So, all the dragon's super duper powers are here now, except not all of them, because, wait for it, there's gonna be even more main character privileges. We're entering chapter 20. Oh, by the way, as a fun thing to love about, which may or may not have been actually funny on purpose, there was a character named Captain Fitzgibbons. I'm just throwing that in there because it made me laugh real hard. Captain Fitzgibbons. So, we're now at chapter 20. This is where a character named Liam enters the picture. Liam is a bodyguard hired by Xaden. Because Xaden if he's super concerned for Violet's safety and, makes plans against her will to keep her safe, it's cool if he does that, but if Dane does it, it's a big no-no. But if Xaden literally hires a bodyguard for her that she did not ask for, it's fine. Liam is a really massive but kind, nice kind of guy. I think a lot of people liked Liam a lot. I guess he's the least offensive of these characters. He doesn't really get much detail either. He's fine, I guess. Liam is there now. Life at the college goes on. Basically, months go by, 4 months go by. We're being told 4 months go by and nothing happens, but also people die. Apparently none of this is worth mentioning at all in these 4 months at this war college where people die. Nothing happens, but people die, but nothing happens. Nothing interesting happens. In chapter 22, some really upsetting, sexy stuff happens. So, we're starting off this chapter with another training session, and we get another example of Violet sexualizing and objectifying the men around her, especially Xaden. And as I read this excerpt to you, I want you to think about what if the genders were reversed. Just think about that as I read this to you. Then I make the mistake of glancing over her shoulder toward the center of the gym. Holy fucking hot. Xaden and Garrick have stripped off their shirts and are sparring like their lives depend on it, a blur of kicks, punches, and rippling muscle. I've never seen two people move that fast. It's a beautiful, hypnotizing dance with lethal choreography that makes me hold my breath whenever Garrick goes in for the kill and Xaden deflects. I've seen countless riders spar without their shirts these days past months. This is nothing new. I should be absolutely immune to the male form, but I've never seen him shirtless. Every edge of Xaden's body is honed like a weapon, all sharp lines and barely leashed power. His rebellion relic twists around his upper body and stands out against the deep bronze of his skin, accentuating every punch he throws, and his stomach. I mean, how many muscles are there in the abdominals? His are so rigidly defined that I could probably count every single one if the rest of him wasn't so damn distracting. And he has the largest dragon relic I've ever seen. Mine consumes the skin between shoulder blades, but Scales' mark takes up his entire back. And I know exactly how that body feels on top of mine, just how much power. My hip stings, knocking me out of my trance, and I startle. The language is so objectifying and sexualized. And she literally says later in the scene, "Here I am salivating over his half-naked body." What is this language? I get that this is a romance book, partly, and that people find other people attractive. But this is insane. She talks like this all the time, whenever other attractive men are around, especially when Xaden is around. She talks like this all the time. Again, I want you to imagine what this narration was like if this was a man talking about female characters. How weird that would feel. And this felt very, very weird. How, in such a sexualized way, all these men are described all the time. Again, I get that people are allowed to be sexy, they're allowed to be described as sexy, but again, this is too much. This is too much. It feels very unnatural, it feels very objectifying. It's done to such a degree where it takes you out of the reading experience and make me feel very, very uncomfortable. It is also during this sparring session I retreated to another very clumsy foreshadowing moment. During the same combat session, Jack is present, and there is literally, the combat happens and then suddenly is described very randomly, a guy walking up to Jack and offering him an orange, and Jack freaks the fuck out because he's allergic to oranges, mentions that out loud, and then the scene just continues. You can't make that shit up. Someone from First Wing offers him something, a slice of the orange he's eating, and Jack shoves his hand away at the wrist. "Get that noxious shit away from me! Do you want me to end up in the infirmary?" "Walk the fuck away, Barlow," Liam warns, dagger in hand. I manage one breath, then two, as Jack's gaze rises from me to someone standing behind me. That look on his face, half envy, half shitting himself, means it has to be Zayden. And then the scene just continues, and you're like, yeah, no shit. Of course the oranges are gonna come back. Someone's gonna, like, give this man some oranges at some point, and he falls ill. This is... I don't mind foreshadowing. Foreshadowing can be very effective. But a lot of writers, I would argue maybe even most writers, use this as a device. And I don't mind if something is foreshadowed. I don't mind if something is foreseeable or predictable. It's just the way in which this is done that feels so unnatural and random. Like the author did not know where to put this in naturally, so it literally just happens randomly in the middle of the scene. It literally interrupts the scene because the information needs to be there, and then the scene just moves on. And it feels so bloody weird. The scene, the chapter goes on, it's chapter 22. Then suddenly, out of nowhere, Violet is overcome by strange urges and intense feelings of lust. She does not know where they come from. She only knows she has to like do something about them now, with Zayden preferably. It is made clear at this point, around chapter 22, 23, that, the dragons who are mated pair, when they have the dragon sex, their riders can also get horny. The horniness from the dragons transfers to the riders. And my question is, why? Why would you think this is a good idea for a plot device? To make your characters horny when their dragons are horny. Just let that sink in. Just think about it. So, Violet desperately needs to do something about it. She says she needs to get laid because apparently masturbation is never an option in this book. And Zayden helps her lock down these lust feelings, to sort of block them out. But of course, all these pent up emotions finally lead to the first makeout session. Yes, Zayden and Violet are finally snorking for the first time. They have a heavy makeout session. Afterwards, Zayden is like, I don't want to do anything that violates you. And I'm like, you already did. You basically already did, because she got horny from dragon feelings, and that kind of carried over into the makeout session. But yeah, they only kissed. It was a one-time event. We're not going to talk about it. They're not together yet. So, chapter 23. Again, it's made clear, it's said that Violet and Zayden are now bonded for life because their dragons are mates. At this point, again, I ask myself, has there never been a case like this before? Aren't other dragons mating? I'm assuming they are. If that's not the case, then how do they know the rules for the dragon bonding with mates? Is there only ever one dragon couple? I don't know. So the thing is, just Violet and Zayden need to stay close together at all time, forced proximity, of course. There's still apparently training and flying sessions going on. We don't really see much of that. Violet at some point is like, oh, I don't understand how people can be so chill about death and so quickly forget about the people that are dying in this college. And you're like, you've been doing the exact same thing. You literally tell me months go by and nothing happens, but also people die, but forget about that. So I'm like, you're doing the exact same thing, Violet, so, I don't know, double standard much, I guess. At this point, she has to go through a bunch of combat challenges. again, if you think we see some of that training for the combat challenges or see the combat challenges themselves, no, because again, this author doesn't like writing any actual exciting plot development scenes. She just casually mentions that she won her first challenge, which feels like something we should have read about maybe. Of course, one of the next challenges is going to be Jack. And remember those random oranges that we talked about? They make a comeback, and Violet essentially poisons Jack with orange, so she doesn't have to fight him. Some further training sessions, we're in chapter 24 now, some further training sessions occur once again as soon as Xaden is in the scene with Violet. She cannot control herself. It's a very normal situation. They're having combat training, something, that's kind of important Violet should improve on, but all she can, again, very inappropriately and randomly think about is how hot Xaden is. The final blade secures. Xaden throws his palms to the mat and shoves with unnatural strength, arching us straight back until my spine kisses the mat again. That's... I suck in the breath, the move shocking me to my toes and lodging him firmly between my thighs. It takes everything I have not to arch up against him and see if he really thinks that kiss was a mistake. Not fair to use your powers on the mat. Magical, sexual, whatever. It's all unfair. Combat session goes on. It is mentioned during this combat training session that they are not allowed to use their magic powers in training. But at the same time, Xaden also says that out there, you'll have to use all the powers they got. So I'm like, why are you not training your magical abilities? This is one of the major things you receive as a weapon from the dragon bonding. It's your major fighting weapon. Why are you not allowed to use it during combat training? Especially if Xaden says that out there, you use whatever you need to use your magic powers all the time and kill motherfuckers. And you're like, cool, am I allowed to, train with our magic powers while we do combat training? No? Cool, guess I'm gonna die. Because, as we know, this military war college wants all their soldiers to die for some reason and not be well equipped. During the sparring session, it's made very clear that Xaden is like, the kiss was a one-time thing, we shouldn't be doing this again. And Violet is being very pushy. She keeps pushing him back into this moment, keeps bringing up the kiss again. She is really insistent on it. Something along the lines of, you liked it back then, or you remember when the kiss was kind of hot, and you can't stop thinking about it. And you're like, again, imagine if this was a gender swap and a man talked to a woman like this and kept bringing up the whole time that they kissed, and he would be like, you know what, we could kiss again like we did back then. You would immediately be like, gross. And it's also gross here. So please shut up, Violet. We're being told that next to combat training, we're literally told that she gets a lot of airtime in. Again, would have been nice if we could read about those actual training sessions with the dragons. But who wants to see dragons in this dragon fantasy book? The chapter literally ends with them going to the dragons to have a dragon riding session. And you're like, cool, finally gonna read about this. Next chapter starts with something completely different. Yep, chapter 25 starts somewhere completely different. And you're like, they just skipped over the potentially fun, exciting dragon riding lesson in the dragon book. Why? Because again, remember, the author doesn't like writing any exciting scenes that would actually further plot or character development. There are further challenges that she's doing, that Violet is training for. We jump again straight into the final challenge. We don't see any of the in-between progress that would be really interesting to read. It's not quite capture the flag, but there's a challenge where their group all the groups from the different, I think, wings are being told, you know, you have to find the most useful, most powerful item in the college that could help us during war or something like that. And the group decides to break into Violet's, the office of Violet's mum, because her mum, remember, is like this big war general at the college. And they decide to break in there and steal like a really important book or something. They manage to do that. They don't want to be found out though, because, you know, breaking into the war general's office is kind of a big no-no and illegal. When they reveal that they have the book, they immediately say where they got it from. But don't worry, there are no consequences, so it's fine. Chapter 26, they travel to an outpost, which is where it would actually be useful to have some geographical world building, because now it would make sense, because, you know, they're traveling outside of the college. No, of course not. They're traveling close to Rhiannon's home. Remember, Rhiannon is like Violet's best friend who I've never mentioned because she's not important. It's close to where Rhiannon's family lives, so they decide to give them a visit. Violet meets up there with Mira, who happens to be stationed there. You would think this is maybe finally an opportunity to get to know more about Rhiannon, who, you know, is has been the best friend of Violet throughout this whole book, but hasn't really been plot relevant or as interesting of a character. And now you're finally given like an opportunity to be like, oh cool, we're gonna meet Rhiannon's family. Let's learn something about that. No, we of course skipped the family reunion. We don't get any of that. Violet talks to Mira for a bit. Then they get attacked. Suddenly attacked. Griffins. Big one, but not as big as dragons. Big as griffins, which are the dragon equivalent of the enemy side, kind of. They attack. Lots of excitement. They have to make an escape. Chapter ends with griffins arriving, and they need to make a run for it or fly for it. Next chapter. Couple of days later. Once again, this author does not like to give us any exciting things that would actually be interesting to read. Now we just skip straight to several hours, no, 2 days, not 2 hours, 2 days later after the Griffin attack back at the college. We do not get to read about the exciting escape that happened. The only notable thing that happens here is I think that Violet and Xaden kissed out of nowhere. It felt kind of random, but yeah, that happened. But now it's a couple of days later, and Violet is more and more thinking about Xaden and how much she likes him, even though at this point she literally admits that she knows nothing about him really, but still decides, you know, he's cool because he's hot. We get treated to finally more dragon bonding. Tyrn, so her dragon, has a saddle now. Xaden had it made for her. And once again, I'm wondering, does no one else have a saddle in this dragon rider school? If everyone has trouble sort of holding on and people literally die from dragons doing barrel rolls, why does no one else have a saddle? Why does only Violet get a saddle? It makes no sense. And also, once again, this is one of those instances where, you know, Xaden does the same thing as Dane does. You know, goes out of his way to help Violet because he knows and is aware that she's frail and weak and small. So he goes out of his way to give her some extra help. If he does it, it's fine, because remember, he's hot. If Dane does it, bad boy. There's a bit of like dragon riding, dragon bonding going on. They play like a weird version of Capture the Flag. And during this training session, Jack almost kills Liam. And it's during that moment that Violet finally unleashes her magical powers, and she unleashes a flash of lightning and kills Jack. So Violet has, of course, lightning powers. I'm saying of course because you remember Xaden has shadow powers. So of course Violet needs to have lightning powers, because opposites, you know. Second of all, I think Tyrannar, or whatever the name of the main dragon is like Celtic for thunder or lightning or something like that. So, And of course, it is also mentioned that a lightning wielder has not been seen in a century. To sum up all the main character privileges, Violet gets the biggest, baddest legendary dragon that has never been seen before, or hasn't been seen in a long time. Not only is she bonded with one dragon, she bonds with two dragons, the second of which is a super adorable mascot baby dragon who has the overpowered magical ability to literally stop time. And then she manifests freaking lightning powers that have never been seen in a century and can, as will be mentioned later, can kill a dragon. Lightning can kill a dragon. Again, I understand that main characters sort of get privileges, it makes sense. You know, Chosen One is a popular trope for a reason, I don't mind that. But there's such a thing as too much of a good thing. This is just... Like, Violet is handed, at this point, everything. Yes, of course you could argue, yeah, she has a chronic illness and she's constantly in pain that stops her from doing things. And not really. She kind of manages to go through every training session at this point without a problem. She just, you know, is real smart about it, or is fast because she's small. She tricks her way through this. She gets everything thrown at her. She gets one dragon, she gets two dragons, she gets superpowers that have never been seen in a century. Xaden helps her. She gets a bodyguard. No, she isn't really running into any trouble at all. Everything sort of like comes to her relatively easily. As long as you push through your chronic pain, you are fine, because, you know, your disability doesn't actually ever disable you from doing anything. But I'm not sure if that's really a great way to represent this kind of disability. I'm leaving that judgment up for other people. That's just what I'm thinking. She manifests this power, kills Jack because he attacked Liam. Liam survives. Dane tries to like calm her down because she's like, oh my god, I freaking killed someone. We're like 3/4 through the book. This is where she finally kills one person. She feels really bad about Dane. Is like, it's okay. You don't need to kill. This power doesn't define you. You don't need to kill. This isn't who you are. And it was an acceptable moment. And Xaden is like, hell yeah, murder is good and you used your power. And you're like, is this really a good contrast? Is this really who we want our love interest to be? Apparently it is, yes. It is now that we enter the dreaded chapter 30. And the first note I have for chapter 30 is, I think the sex is about to happen. Okay. The sex scenes in this are, compared to the rest of the novel, how it is written, graphic as fuck. Literally. I'm not, even though I'm asexual, I'm not generally opposed to sex scenes in novels, especially if it's a romance novel, and if they, you know, make sense for like furthering the character or the relationship development. So, yeah. The thing is, I've mentioned several times, read to you several times now, how strangely juvenile and YA the writing style for this novel feels. So when we finally get to the sex scene, it feels so much different compared to the rest of the novel. It just like, the graphic sex scene descriptions just take you out. Because the whole time this has read like a YA novel about 16-year-olds, and suddenly hardcore sex is happening. And the transition feels so weird, and it's graphic as hell compared to the rest of the book. I will say one positive thing here. I do like that the author actually uses, the actual words to describe which body parts go where. No fancy metaphorical symbolic description for the body parts. No, she actually uses words for the body parts and where they go, which is nice. Still, some of these phrases are being used during the sex scenes feel very much like you're reading an explicit rated fan fiction on AO3. There's something like sensual assault or tongue sliding against mine. At some point, I think it's also, I don't know if it's during this or later sex scene, at some point it's also mentioned that they're sucking tongues. And that sounds, if you've kissed someone before, sucking tongue sounds weird and uncomfortable if you actually did that. Just think about it. Oh, and also, of course, we need to quickly mention that there's no possibility of the characters getting pregnant. It's quickly mentioned that they take the fertility suppressant, just in case, no babies. It's just quickly, like, randomly kind of out of nowhere mentioned, oh, no babies are not an option. Don't worry. Of course, according to the cliche, their magic powers burst out of themselves while they shag. Especially, of course, during the climax, just like literal lightning strikes. They set a room on fire. Weird shadow tentacle powers are coming out of Xaden. It's so fucking hilarious if you think about what that would actually look like. They like break furniture and throw each other around. It's super aggressive and rough sex. And Violet's body is completely fine. Remember, up until this moment, we've mentioned at almost every opportunity how small and frail she is, that she has chronic pain, that she bruises easily, that she breaks bones easily. Remember, she's a tiny girl, a tiny woman, as she would like to point out. And he's like 6'4". It's like that. And then they have super rough, aggressive sex that literally breaks furniture. But her body is fine. This is once again one of the instances where I feel like, okay, a chronic illness just kind of feels like it's only there when it's really relevant, but during times where it should, actually cause problems, like during an aggressive makeout session, nah, it's fine. Don't worry about it. It goes on for like a couple of pages. We finally get some background on Xaden, but if you think at this point, finally some detailed character descriptions, no, it's only really there, so it makes you think, oh, he's such a tortured bad boy. Because it's revealed that Xaden basically took on the guilt of all the rebellion kids. So he's basically the one responsible. If any of the other kids do shit, he'll take the responsibility. So, of course, Violet's like, oh my god, he's so tortured and brave for doing this. And you're like, it's just there to make you go, aww. But nothing else. We go to chapter 31 now. The sex is ruled to be a one-time event. Xaden is like, no, this only happened one time, we're not doing this again. But guess what? Violet. See, I'm also already using the nickname because it sounds ridiculous. Violet becomes, if you can believe it, even more horny after the sex. Because she now takes every opportunity to mention the sex to him, to be weirdly sexual with him in their conversation, especially because they are bonded via their dragons. They can also talk to each other mentally. So she just like makes like weirdly sexual insinuating comments to him in his mind. And it feels really uncomfortable that she keeps doing that. At this point, it gets mentioned that the first year of the school will be over in 2 weeks. I was kind of surprised by that because I felt like nothing has happened, and also timelines are sort of wishy-washy in this. For school year, it's never really made clear, when major events happen in the timeline. It's not like in, for example, Harry Potter, where, you have clear points where you're like, okay, now it's Halloween, now it's Christmas, now it's Easter holidays, now it's summer. We don't really get this here. We occasionally just get like, 2 months pass, 4 months pass, and then just like some little bits happen, and it's like 3 weeks go by, and you're like, okay, I don't really know where we're at. But apparently the first year is about to be over in 2 weeks, and they have some festivities, I guess, going on. At these festivities, her mother is there, the big general, and the king of the kingdom, of the country, is there, and it's mentioned surprisingly casually. Like, the way they talk to the king is very casual. You would think this is a really big, sort of impressive thing if, the literal king of your country shows up. The king that, leads the war, the king you're fighting this war for. No, not really. We don't really get any impressions on, like, what it's like to meet the king. He's just a dude, I guess. This is also where Violet, I think for the first time since the beginning of the book, encounters her mum again. Nothing really happens. If you think, the complicated relationship between Violet and her mum should be, or is going to be a relevant and really interesting plot point, don't worry about it. The only thing that happens here is that her mum says that Violet and Xaden are bonded by necessity, and for some reason Violet gets upset about how she says that, even though that's literally the case. Then something happens. I don't know, Xaden is gone. She's trying to find him. There's some upsetting stuff about him. She's trying to find him. We enter chapter 32. So Violet and Xaden meet up on the parapet again. Remember this thin strip of dangerous bridge from the beginning of the novel, which Violet is now walking across no problem while wearing a dress and with, I think, no shoes on. It's fine. This is where they have they're revealing their feelings to one another. Violet says that she loves him, even though she still has no idea about who he is, what he does, what he likes, who he is as a person. All she does is lust for this man, which is not romance, something I'm going to come back to probably at the end. They sort of talk about their feelings. They're saying they're setting themselves up for heartbreak because it's Xaden's final year and he'll graduate from the college. And I was like, why are you setting yourself up for heartbreak? You are a bonded couple because of your dragons. Didn't you say you need to be in close proximity to one another? Basically almost all the time, because otherwise your dragons suffer and you suffer. So they have to kind of find a way to keep putting them back together. So I don't exactly understand why they think they have to leave each other. Because, they said we're literally bonded by necessity because dragons. So I don't really see what the problem is here. They talk about it. He admits that he wanted her from basically page 1. He says that he liked her and wanted to have her the moment he saw her. Day 1 at the parapet. And this is where the whole enemies to lovers trope that was advertised for this book completely falls apart for me. Because this has never been enemies to lovers. He is never her enemy. She only thinks he wants to kill her because her sister said, oh no, look out for this guy, he's really bad. And she was like, oh no, he's a bad guy, he probably wants to kill me. And then several scenes and chapters happen where he could do something bad to her, where he could kill her, and nothing happens, and he never kills her. And for more than half of the book, she's like, but he wants to kill me. And I'm like, bitch, after the first 5 months, at least you should have known. And now it's revealed that he liked her, or basically was attracted to her, which is not the same thing. From the very beginning, there was never any enemies or villains to lovers. This never happened. They both liked each other from the beginning. I'm saying liking because that's what the book wants you to believe. What this actually means is they both were sexually attracted to one another from page 1. And then, of course, another sex scene is about to happen. I want you to read something here because Xaden has this thing going on that I think a lot of romance novels like this have for their love interest, for their male love interests, that I think gets romanticized a lot, but I think personally is very uncomfortable and kind of dubious. Namely, Zayden is the kind of guy who always talks about how much he has to control his attraction to the woman he's interested in. He always says he has to like control himself around her. He has like so many sexual urges that he has to fight back, and if she doesn't leave right now, he's going to have sex with her because he doesn't know how much he can control his love and his lust for her. He like literally, physically has to restrain himself, otherwise the sex is just going to happen. And this is how he expresses this in the book. I fucking need you, Violet, right now, and I don't need anyone, so I'm not quite sure how to handle this feeling, but I'm giving it my best. And if you don't want this tonight, that's fine, but I'm going to need you to walk out that door right now, because if you don't, I'm going to have you naked on your back in the next 2 minutes. The intensity in his eyes and the vehemence of his words should frighten me, but they don't. Even if this man loses every ounce of his self-control, I know he'll never hurt me. We really need to stop romanticizing this shit. It's not romantic. It's actually really kind of creepy that this man has to constantly remind himself not to be overcome by his sexual attraction, that he has to actively, physically hold himself back, because otherwise he would just, shag the lady. And you're like, this is not cool. This is creepy. If a man, every time he sees a woman that he finds attractive, he has to actively hold himself back, or otherwise something sexy is going to happen. Like, really think about that. It's not romantic, it's fucking creepy. So they have sex, it's chapter 32, they get interrupted, which starts chapter 33, an attack is about to happen, which is sort of like a simulation for the war games that they are about to do at the college. Everyone's getting excited, like this is an actual war thing, even though they make it quite clear it's, a simulated fight for the war games, but okay, I guess we're prepping for that. They get ready to depart, and they fly off. It's chapter 34, 35 now. They land at the location they're supposed to be at. There are griffins there, the villains, and some mysteriously hooded people. But for some reason, they don't attack Zayden and the rest of the crew. In fact, Zayden lands right next to them and talks to the woman, seemingly the leader of the Griffin pack. And lo and behold, the rebellion kids rebelled and betrayed the war college. Big surprise, I know. So, Zayden is a betrayer, just like his father, and of course Violet feels absolutely gutted by what happened. Zayden tries to explain this by saying that the leaders of the war college have always tried to keep certain things about the war a secret. Things like the Vernon. The Vernon are basically, from how I understood it, weird magic humanoid people that create the griffins. I'm not quite sure. I'll probably come back to that. They create the evil magic creatures. Was it the wyverns? I'm not quite sure. Like the Vernon create magical evil creatures, and for some reason the leaders of the war college have tried to keep this a secret. The rebellion is sort of like helping these people fight, I guess. What happens now is that an attack descends upon the small town where they're at, which I'm not quite sure is if that's still like part of the simulation. They also mentioned they've been sent there to die, so I guess this was like sort of set up from the school as well, but they didn't know Violet was gonna be there. Yeah. So the village is being attacked by the wyverns, which are like weird flying creatures, which have been created by the Vernon. And they need to decide if they want to defend the village or leave and win the war game. But of course they decide to die fighting, and they try to defend the village as best they can. There's some cool stuff about that, like some cool stuff could happen here, but again the narration and the writing style sort of undermines some really cool stuff. Like sometimes like Taryn the dragon has a really cool one-liner, and then Violet immediately ruins it. So they like decide to go out and ride and kill people, and then this really cool one-liner from Taryn happens. We will feast on their bones, Silver One. Graphic, but point made. I'm like, no, just let the cool line from the dragon stand there. That sounded really badass. And then you ruined it. They fight the wyverns. Wyverns are basically, from what I understood, how they are described, dragons, but with 2 legs. Kind of weird. During this time, of course, Violet also has to deal with her feelings for Xaden, because Xaden betrayed her, and she feels betrayed, and she's like, oh, you've betrayed my trust, my school, my family, but that hasn't changed my love for you, even if I hate you. And you're like, what the hell? What does that mean? And why hasn't that changed your love? He's literally betrayed you. Yeah, the fighting goes on. She's like on a dragon. She incinerates some houses and clock towers, where I was wondering, can we be sure that no civilians are in there? I have to question once again how Violet is the smartest character in the book, because she's literally told before, like as they go into battle, that they will have to go into ground combat with the Vernon, because fire doesn't work on them, and like the dragon spells don't work on them, and she like still tries to incinerate them. It doesn't work, and she's like, that doesn't work. Maybe I should try something else. I'm like, yeah, no shit. You've literally been told before you went into battle. This is why we're told that lightning can kill a dragon, that she should use that to fight, which made me question 2 things. A, can dragons fly during a thunderstorm? Or do they just not do that? And second question, why would a dragon, if it comes directly from the dragon, why would a dragon give a human the power that can kill other dragons? Why would you give that ability to anyone? What would really help during this big-ass fight scene that's happening, it's going on for like 2 or 3 chapters almost, some time stop powers. You know, Andana is there, the little baby dragon is there, she's like strapped to Taryn, and you're like, where's the time stop? Nothing. Again, riders managed to hold on during like barrel rolls and loop-de-loops, and you're like, how does anyone do this with any upper arm strength? Then, of course, some minor important character has to die. Rhiannon isn't there. Xaden can't die because he's the love interest. Dane is also not there, so Liam gets killed off. Or more like his dragon dies, which means if the dragon dies, the rider also dies. But if the rider dies, the dragon is fine, so don't worry. So yeah, Liam's dragon is killed. Liam dies for some reason. He actually gets a couple of minutes after his dragon has died to say some final words, and he literally uses his final breath to tell Violet that Xaden is a good guy and that he needs her. I'm like, really? The final words of this one character people liked. Sure. Chapter 37, the battle is ongoing. Andana is there the whole time. Still no time stop. They find out, very conveniently, Violet finds out that if they manage to kill one of the bad guys, one of the Vernon, never know what this is actually called, so do all the wyverns they have created. Very convenient, and of course Violet finds out how that works and pulls it off. Andana wants to help. No one lets her until, for some reason, finally, a couple of paragraphs later, finally a time stop happens. It is here that, once again, it's time stop. It's the middle of a battle. Some really fucked up shit is happening. Liam has just died. Dragons die. Riders die. Middle of the battle. It's horrendous. People are being incinerated. People are being murdered, being stabbed. And Violet looks at Xaden and thinks, damn, sometimes I forget just how beautifully lethal he is. Because, this is the right time to think that kind of stuff. Chapter 38, Undana has finally stopped time. We're so close to the end. Time stop has happened. And she, Violet, she, catches Violet, because Violet fell off Terran. Undana, sort of swoops in, but of course she's, too weak to carry her. Where I was like, okay, I get that Undana is, small for a dragon, but she's still a dragon with powers, and Violet is super small and weak and frail. Really, the baby dragon can't carry her, even if it's bigger. And no, okay. Violet is poisoned by a weapon, by the enemy, by a dagger, and falls. But of course, Xaden is there, swoops in, and then the chapter just kind of jumps to the end of the battle with Violet in a delirium about to die. It feels like once again, the author doesn't really want you to read any exciting shit, and it felt like the writer didn't really know how to end this fighting scene, so we just kind of jump to the end, I guess. Chapter 39. It's the final chapter. And it is this chapter that we get Xaden's point of view. My note was, Xaden's POV, I'm scared. And for good reason. First off, he talks exactly the same way as Violet. He swears arguably even more than her. Super horny. We're gonna come back to that in a minute, because first off, he has to info dump on the reader why he likes her. If you've been wondering this whole time what he actually sees in her, you'll just info dump Xaden, literally says out loud what he likes about her, and that's what this is the excerpt for that. She can't die, and not just because there's a chance I won't survive. She can't die because I know I can't live without her, even if I do. Somewhere between the shock of our attraction at the top of that turret to realizing she risked her own life by giving up a boot for someone else on the parapet that first day, to throwing those daggers at my head under the oak tree. I wavered. I should have realized the danger of getting too close the first time I put her on her back and showed her how easily she could kill me on the mat. A vulnerability I've allowed no one else. But I brushed it off as an undeniable attraction to a uniquely beautiful woman. When I watched her conquer the gauntlet, then defend Undana at thrashing, I stumbled, stunned by both her cunning and her sense of honor. When I burst into her room and found Oren's treacherous hand at her throat, the rage that made it so easy to kill all 6 of them without batting an eye should have told me I was headed for a cliff. And when she smiled at me after mastering her shield in mere minutes, her face lighting up as the snow fell around us, I fucking fell. We hadn't even kissed, and I fell. Or maybe it was when she threw her knives at Barlow, when jealousy ate me alive seeing Atos kiss her mouth. I dreamed about countless times. Looking back, there were 1,000 tiny moments that pulled me over the edge for the woman asleep in the bed I always pictured her in. And I never told her, not until she was delirious with poison. Why? Because I was scared to give her power over me when she already held it all. Because she's Lilith Sorengale's daughter. Because she kept giving Atos second and third chances. No, because I couldn't give her those words without being totally, completely honest with her. And of the way she looked at me at the lake, the utter betrayal. The rustle of sheets makes my gaze whip to her face, and I take my first full breath since she fell from Terran's back. Her eyes are open. Yeah, so he basically just info dumps on you why he likes her, because we couldn't get any of those emotional explorations during the book, so he just straight up tells you in the literal final chapter. By the way, don't worry, he also uses those weird punctuated full stop sentences like brilliant fucking woman and stuff like that. Yeah, he likes using that too. And he's also really horny. Again, he is like, I have to control myself around her. He's like, she exists and I get horny. He literally says that. I'm going to read that to you in a minute. And it feels so utterly uncomfortable the way he sees her that way, how sort of uncontrollable his lust is. Like men have this urge to have sex or be attracted to a woman and they literally can't hold that back, like they're not in control of themselves. That is such a toxic mindset, and we really need to stop romanticizing that shit, because it sounds like this. I nearly swallow my tongue at the sight of her unbound, damp hair curling just under her breasts. I can't even articulate what it is about the strands that push me straight into need to fuck her now territory, and I'm too busy fighting to keep my hands at my sides to question the why of it. She exists, and I get turned on. I've come to accept that particular truth over the last year. So it's been apparently 3 days since the poisoning. Don't worry, she's fine. She got healed immediately. So don't worry, there are no stakes. She's alive, she's fine. She finally wakes up. We're told that Adana is now really big and lost her powers. That's just casually thrown out there. Apparently it has happened in like the 3 days only. And you're like, okay, cool. I hope this is going to be explored in the second book. I don't even know if I'm going to read the second book. But this should be something that should better be explored in the second book. They like talk. They talk it out. They're back in love. Things are still a bit weird. Because, you know, he's betrayed her. They are now located somewhere in a castle. Violet is worried about being attacked again, but Zane is like, no, it's fine, don't worry, we're in a castle. He literally says stone doesn't burn. I was like, yeah, stone doesn't burn, but you know, castles can still burn down. I hope he knows that. They talk about, you know, how they could learn how to trust each other again, and she says, I gave you my trust for free once, and once is all you get. I was like, so she literally says that the first time she fell in love with him, she gave her trust for free. He didn't even have to earn it. And I was like, that explains a lot. She just gives it out for free. And of course, there's one more final reveal as we close the final chapter of Fourth Wing. It is revealed that the brother, Brennan, is actually still alive. Goes and talks to Violet, and he welcomes her to the revolution. And that's how Fourth Wing ends. We're now at the final part of this video, where I want to talk a bit about how I would try to improve, or at least change some things about Fourth Wing to, I don't know, to improve it, to make it more readable, to make it more enjoyable. I don't know. This is like some of the stuff I would like say or suggest, partly as like when I'm an editor. This is like part of the stuff where I would be like, hey, maybe we should do this a bit differently. Hey, maybe this is a bit weird. Maybe this is where we could improve things. These are just like some suggestions that I personally came up with as I read this. First off, I would start this novel off differently, so we can get to know Violet a bit more as a character before she even joins the Writers' Squadron, because we have no idea what Violet or her life, what they were like before she joins the Writers' Squadron. She just immediately gets thrown into it. We have no idea what she was like in a normal setting that she was used to, like the Scribe Quadrant, or before the war college. It would really, I think it would have helped if the novel had started off differently. Like, let's, I don't know, start off the first chapter with her doing her work at, you know, during scribe training. What's her day-to-day life like? Like, so you have some basis for her as a character, what she's like, and also that we have a basis for like the further knowledge and historical reference she gives later, which is like based on a lot of her scribe training. This could give the reader's an opportunity to get to know her better, you know, like what does she like, what does she do in her free time when she has like a normal day. This would also be a really good way to like bring in some encounters with her family, like what's her day-to-day life like when she talks to her mother, to her mom, like what's her relationship with her family there in a day-to-day life setting. To compare this to a novel that does this relatively well, I think Hunger Games does this so well, because we start off Hunger Games with, you know, Katniss in District 12, and we see what her day-to-day life is like. You know, she goes out hunting with Gale, what's her relationship with him, what do they do, what's she good at, what does she like, what does she talk about, a relationship with her mother and her sister, and then we get to, you know, the what's it called, the selection, the reaping or whatever, and then the plot hits off. but you do have a comparison for, okay, this was her normal life, and now she gets thrown into this strange situation. So we do have a bit of a comparison. We know who Katniss is as a character before she's thrown into this violent setting, which I think would have worked really well for Fourth Wing as well. This could be like the first chapter, and in the second chapter, you could, like at the end of the first chapter, maybe she gets told after she comes home from scribe training, she gets told by her mom, okay, you have to join the Writer's Quadrant now, because this would immediately be like, whoa, what? Okay, inciting incident. Now the story can happen. The second chapter then could be like, I don't know, you could like sort of maybe speed through like a bit of like a training montage, because it's mentioned she has like 6 months of training. You could set up, some basics for what she learned, like the dagger wielding that she does a lot throughout the book. You could set up some of the family dynamics more before she goes to the parapet, because, she could talk to her sister or her mum during those like 6 months of training montage or something. And then the story could pick up from there. One of the big problems I think also this novel has is that there is no... there is a story, but there is no central plot. There's not there's not a goal, a straight up goal Violet follows. The goal is just to survive and get through the year. But we know that's like going on anyway. We know that's probably going to happen. We need something else to go with that keeps us interested. I know it's a bit of a basic comparison, and we all know we don't want to promote J.K. Rowling, but I think Harry Potter, the stories of Harry Potter do this pretty well, because Harry Potter is good because those books are not just fantasy novels, they are mystery stories within a fantasy world, because there's never just like the school year. Harry just never just simply goes through the school year. There's usually a mystery. In the first novel, you have what is the what's like the Philosopher's Stone? What's in the vault? How do we find out about the Philosopher's Stone? And the second one is who's the heir of Slytherin? Why are people being petrified? That kind of stuff. There's always like a mystery. So there's always like the school year, but there's also a mystery for something that Harry and the others can work on. And I think something like this would have helped this novel as well. It can be like just some things I came up with, like just like randomly. I don't know. Have her try to find out why her mum sent her there. She could like try to find out what's my mum hiding? Why did she want me to go here so badly? Does she keep secrets? Maybe let's investigate her. Could there be a conspiracy? Is there like a conspiracy going on with her mum, and that's why she sent her daughter to the Writer's Quadrant? That's what she could find. She could investigate the rebels, because they killed her brother, or so she thinks. They killed her brother, and now she thinks they plan more, and now she wants to find out what they got actually planned, which would also even be a reason to get her closer to Xaden, because, he's the leader of the rebels. Those are just like some simple, basic plot ideas that I came up with on the spot, and I think those would really help to improve the story of the book. Also, the characters need a lot more detail. Of course, Violet and Xaden sort of get detailed descriptions, even though not really. The core issue for them is their romantic relationship, and their romantic relationship is purely based on lust and nothing else. They are horny for each other from page 1, and there's never really a true exploration of why they like each other, how the love develops, why do they like each other, what do they know about each other, why do they appreciate one another. There's never really any exploration for that. It's just Xaden is hot, therefore love interest. And romantic novels, especially romantasy, really needs to stop treating lusting after someone or finding someone sexually attractive is the same thing as developing romantic feelings. It's just not the same. You can find someone sexually attractive, sure, but please then don't pretend you're also in love with that person, because that's just not the same thing. Some secondary characters also could have benefited from more detail, especially like Liam and Rhiannon, I never know how to pronounce her name. Because a lot of people liked Liam, but I guess because he was nice. He was just nice. He was a nice guy. And Rhiannon was two stereotypes dressed in one person. She was the black best friend who also happened to be the promiscuous bisexual who slept around. There were opportunities to explore Rhiannon, for example, in that chapter where we meet her family, but then we don't really get to meet her family. I almost don't mention Rhiannon or Liam or any of those other secondary characters because they're not important. They're never plot relevant. They don't do anything. Worst of all, Jack is like the Draco Malfoy, but worse of this book, because Jack has no reason to kill Violet. He just like sees her and is like, weak, ergo, kill you, I don't care, I'm just gonna fucking kill you. He has no real reason to be mean to her. And all you need to do is give him a reason to actually hate her. Can be a very basic reason. I don't know, maybe she almost accidentally killed him on the parapet, and now he feels bad about it and wants to kill her as revenge. Maybe he thinks that she got in on, or that she has privileges because her mum is the general and he doesn't like that. Maybe after the thrashing he's jealous because she got the black dragon and he really wanted to bond with the black dragon. Or maybe, I don't remember if Jack is one of the rebels, but if he's a rebel, he automatically has a reason to hate her because her mum killed his family. So he would have a reason to dislike and kill her. Just come up with a reason for him to dislike her, because he's just walking around the whole novel being like, Soren Gale, I'm gonna kill you! And you're like, but why? The whole language and plot holes and writing in this, and we always sort of talked about this throughout this video, the whole language feels entirely untypical for fantasy, especially if you go for high fantasy, so stuff like Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones, that kind of stuff. This is not how you write a high fantasy novel, or fantasy novel in general. Again, I'm not saying that you can't do slightly modern language or you can't swear, but it still has to feel appropriate to the genre. If this book, or an excerpt of this book, had been given to me while I was working as an editor for fantasy novels, this would be one of the major reasons I would have declined this book, personally. Because I would have been like, this reads not like a fantasy whatsoever. This is gonna put people off who actually are fans of the genre, who are staples of the genre. They will see this and be like, this is weird, this reads not like fantasy whatsoever, taking you completely out of the reading experience. Again, there are so many illogical plot points and potential and actual plot holes that already happen within like the first 3, 4, 5 chapters, where I would have been like, where I would have put so many question marks and like questions for the author to be like, how does this make sense? How does this work? Why would you write this if you actually mean that? Like, how the war college works, but they kill off all their soldiers, stuff like that. Again, I'm not saying that you can't do like ridiculous stuff from time to time, but it has to be stuff where you're like, okay, I can't believe that happens. It doesn't take me out of the reading experience too much. But an editor would be like, this makes no sense. If you have to question this the whole time while reading the novel, this just takes you out of the reading experience, and this wouldn't work at all. We already mentioned that the world building is done in a really clumsy and lazy way. It's done through dialogue, it's info dumping, it's a lot of like, did you know kind of conversations between two characters who already know what they're talking about. So that doesn't work. And the writing style in and of itself has so many inconsistencies and constant repetitions of not only swear words, but also like full stop sentences for like sort of punctuated speech. So like 3 things that were the most annoying is there were several repetitions of her head tingles. Her head tingled, Violet's head tingled all the time. Whenever Xaden was nearby, her head tingled. It was never made clear if that was because of their bond they shared, their mental bond, but her head tingled the whole time like he was, I don't know, some kind of ASMR machine. I don't know. Then I already mentioned the swearing. The swearing happens a lot. I've found this comment somewhere where someone counted the swear words, and I don't know how accurate this is, but it sounds pretty accurate to me from what I read. The word fuck is said 257 times, and the word shit is said 145 times throughout the whole book. So you can imagine how fucking annoying this shit gets after a while. I already mentioned it. The most annoying thing, the punctuated speech. In every chapter you had 3 to 5 of these weird full stop sentences where it's like, so fucking beautiful, what the hell. It got so bloody annoying. after a while. And it's the kind of thing where an editor would say, cut this out, change this, cut this out, or change the sentence structure because this gets too annoying and too repetitive. Basically, based on the writing, this novel really does feel like the author, and this is true, the author has not written a fantasy novel before. You can tell the author has not written fantasy before, because not only is the writing super untypical, just in its style alone for fantasy, but also world-building mistakes are very clumsy. It over-relies on action instead of actually, showing what the characters are going through. It skips interesting bits, instead just focuses on the romance. This is a romance first and a fantasy novel second. This is basically just a romance with a fantasy setting. Forget about fantasy. The romance is the most important part. You can tell. And I can only hope that because I know there are going to be I think 5 books in this series. I don't know if I'll read the sequels, but I can only hope that the author picks up on these mistakes and will improve on them, because there's some great ideas in there. Honestly, dragons are always a fun idea, and you could do so much with that, and the whole rebellion stuff could be really interesting. There's so much potential for some really interesting story and character work. I only hope that the author will actually do something with that in further books. Okay, this video is finally done. My throat, as you can maybe hear, is sore as hell. I'm gonna go have some ginger tea now and make some dinner because it's late. Thank you so much for making it all the way through this video. If you've reached this point, again, I want to say, if you enjoyed this book, good for you. All what I'm trying to do is with this video is to tell you, great that you enjoyed this, but there is so much more fun fantasy out there. Go and explore that. Like I said, I don't think I'm gonna read the sequels for Fourth Wing unless this for some reason becomes really popular and people really want me to analyze sequels. The sequels we'll see. But for now, thank you so much for watching. I hope this was enjoyable and understandable, listening to me ranting and trying to, explain myself for several hours. Yeah, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't done it already. I've also written a shorter review for Fourth Wing on my Goodreads. Link for that is down in the description below. Again, thank you for making it all the way through, and I'll see all of you next time. Goodbye.